Welcome back to Cinema Pursuit, where we tackle the movies that we love in a search for cinema. And today we are arguably talking about the greatest cinematic experience in a movie theater possible. What movie are we talking about today, Zach?
We are talking about one of Nolan's most divisive yet biggest
The
swings ever taken in a major blockbuster. The movie we're talking about is Interstellar. It recently had an IMAX re-release that me and Vikash both went and saw. I got my ticket right here. You can go look at it.
mine's
Nothing
sitting
bad
over
on it.
there.
World's tallest IMAX, they claim. Not the biggest, but the tallest.
It is. I mean, I think it's the second tallest technically, but it is pretty
What
much the
is
tallest
where's the
now.
other one? It's
Or
like Orlando or
like,
something.
no. It's in like Dubai.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Dubai,
Okay.
and then like our so
Yeah.
we're it's the biggest, it's the tallest screen in America,
And
at
I
least North
I do want
America,
to talk a
right?
little bit
So
about that experience before we talk about the movie. Like,
yeah,
you know, IMAX tickets are expensive. I get all that. I don't go to see maybe one or two movies a year in IMAX anymore, but I make them count. So when this one was being re-released, Vikash had to make sure and drag me to it because I was like, schedule holiday stuff. I was out of town.
but he was out of town. I literally closed work early, 3 hours. Like we made it
The
work,
day I flew
and
back from
and
Boston
I
to get
I
here,
told this
yeah,
man, I
I
was
went
like,
to the movie.
there's no other chance.
No.
It's now or never. It's been a decade since we saw this in IMAX, and we're not. I don't know when we're gonna get another chance. This movie made another $21 million within 2 weeks, Zach. This is like one of the biggest re-releases for IMAX, if not the biggest re-release. And I mean, you talk about it because the effect. I think the effect for you for the rewatch is a lot better than me.
Yeah.
Because me, you already knew. I love this movie.
So,
But
okay.
what happened for you?
So this is the first time I've rewatched it in a theater, of course, since it came out. And also, I haven't rewatched this in a long time. I tried to go figure out when I last rewatched it, but it was pre-letterbox for me. So it was when I was still using IMDb to keep track of what I watch, and you can't just like relog movies on there unless you change the rating. So I have no idea when the last time I watched this was, which is funny because I always consider this, one of my Nolan movies I love, but maybe not in the top five, right? And this rewatch changed.
Nolan doesn't have a bad movie. That's
No,
the thing,
and that's
right?
again for him. Like that's, I mean, shoot, his okay movies are better than everybody else. And not that this isn't just an okay movie, but what I'm just trying to say is when I saw it in IMAX for the first time, one, I got to re-experience that kind of awe that we both had when we first watched it because almost 10 years ago, I guess at this point, me and Vikash are over 10 years. We watched it in theaters. We went and saw the original when it came out, but also just actually seeing the ending now 10 years later with the time to kind of, the ending got a lot of criticism when it first came out, the whole love transcends time thing. And I'll get more into it later, but I understand what Nolan was going for finally. It finally clicked for me. I finally understood the purpose behind the movie, the meaning. And
Vindication.
that was always a missing piece for me where I was like, I love this movie, but like the last like 20 minutes, like it's just not working for me. That was always my problem. And when I would rewatch it, like I would just rewatch sometimes just parts of the movie on YouTube and stuff, because like I just always knew I'd get to the end there and I'd just be like, I don't know. Um, but this time was an incredible experience, and I suggest it's not going to be an IMAX anymore for anybody, I guess, when this comes out. But keep an eye on the IMAX releases. Me and Vikash missed the Gravity re-release, and I still regret that. That would have been a fun one too.
This is better
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
this was shot in 4:3, and we got to see it for the first time in 4:3. We saw it in IMAX in 2014, and talk about we're gonna do it at some point, but this is easily one of the greatest experiences we've ever had in a theater together, and that's 2014. Not the 2024 one, the
Well,
2014.
I would almost argue that the 2024 watch we just had is also in my top movie
It
experiences.
Oh no, it
Yeah,
most definitely it
because
is now.
I
But it's
it is
like,
incredible.
the memory of it,
Mhm.
remembering it for 10 years. I mean, it means a lot for me because first of all, we were hot off of Dark Knight Rises,
Yep.
and I remember after Dark Knight, so much hype. I was overhyping the crap out of the Dark Knight, like to the point where I was, they had
You
the
still are,
files of
buddy.
like Dr. Pavel,
Yeah.
and I was using it in the Obama trailer that we made in
Yeah.
high school and all this stuff, and I was so into it. And then we got to see the movie, and I was disappointed because I overhyped it.
You were
And then after
disappointed
that,
in
I was
Dark
like,
Knight Rises?
when I saw it the first time.
I saw it 3 times in theater when it came out.
I saw it one time in the theater because
Imagine having
you
that
know
much
why.
time now, right?
But
Back then, it was just
no,
like,
no,
"What
no,
else
it's
am I gonna
that's
do?"
not the problem. No, that's not the problem. You know what I'm talking about, what happened after that opening night. I just didn't wanna go into the movie theater after that.
Oh, yeah.
But when this teaser trailer came out, talk about the trailer for this, man. You know, the one with
Oh, lord.
McConaughey, and there's just only shots from the movie are just like Lithgow and Murph holding their hands.
Buddy, you're
This movie, I went into it barely knowing anything, avoiding everything. I'm like, I'm not seeing anything.
well,
And
it
that's just how I've been for
because
the
that
last
teaser
decade.
trailer gave you everything
Yeah,
you needed to know. Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
it was a year, it was literally a year out. They're like, okay, you're gonna see this movie in 1 year.
I know.
And like, get ready.
But it was
And
like finally him stepping back away from Batman again. Everybody's like, "Okay, finally we get a
and
Nolan
and
individual
Inception
story."
was
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah.
okay? And this movie was the first. This is the first movie I've ever cried in, maybe ever. Especially in a theater, this is the first time I was crying because it wasn't anything where I was like, "Oh, we're gonna cry." I was listening to Ben Mankiewicz, Talking Heads is his podcast. He had Margot Robbie on, and I was like listening to like 3 podcasts that day, and I got to one about Steven Soderbergh, and he was talking about like, I don't cry during the movies where they're like, they're asking for it. I cry during the movies where it just happens. And
Yeah.
this is one of those movies where, Murph or Cooper's sitting there in front of the screen, watching his kids' lives, go by him. And it it changed something in me.
Yeah.
And there's something about this movie where if you see it in the theater, there's nothing else like it. A lot of people online, Mia Khalifa, someone, we're doing some other work with, people are like, what is this? Like, y'all left out this whole part of this movie. It feels like this is the first time we're seeing the full movie because it's like people didn't see Interstellar a lot. They saw it. It was a hit, but people didn't see it still, even then. And now people are seeing it again. And they're like, oh, this theater experience is something else.
That
And I was sobbing. I was literally sobbing by the end of this movie. I'm happy crying, by the end of this movie. And this is one movie where I can say that like we always want to chase this. This is Lawrence of Arabia level. If you ever have a chance to go see a movie in the theater, go see this in the theater.
I think you made a good point there. One of my favorite things about this has been like the re-examination of Interstellar, that this was always like the people who didn't like Nolan or had anything against Nolan, this was always a movie they pointed out. This is where they, had their axe to grind. It was always, I know a lot of people who didn't like Interstellar, both online and in person, who did not like the movie when it came out or had issues with it. And to see all these people who normally would have just talked, made fun of this movie or talked about how it was like very much a lesser Nolan movie, re-examine it, be able to have that cultural re-examination where all these movie people went to the theater. And I have some theories to why this did so well in our current age compared to maybe 2014. Well, and I did well there, but I'm just talking about critically. That
But it is
reexamination is
but it's
awesome. It made me feel so
it's
much better that people got to come back around to this movie with fresh eyes, with a fresh perspective, a little 10 years older. And we're like, oh, like this was actually one of our great movies that maybe we didn't give enough respect in the time that it came out at.
because the problem is that the movie, not a problem, one of the great things about this movie is that it's prescient and it's timeless. With a lot of Nolan's movies, that's what it is. That he's very timely, but when you go back to his movies, like, wait, he was talking about this 10 years ago. And I think it very much is the hand of his brother too, like Jonathan Nolan, because it's something where I see it even in the shows. I always talk about person of interest, but I see it within all of his work where it's like he's tackling a lot of themes where you're like, oh dang, like y'all were talking about this already. Like these are things that always come back to human elements. And I'm telling you, man, seeing this one in the theaters, every time I watch this movie, this is one of the epic movies of our time. This is one of the most epic movies ever made, period. Meaning that, you know how The Hobbit, it's like there and back again. It feels like I went to another galaxy. I went through all this emotion. I came back. You're reunited. And it's a full story. Yeah, they leave it open, but that's not even the point of the story. It's like you feel the emotion of it. This is one of the greatest joys of my life is
It
watching this movie.
It's because it's such a big swing. Like this is the
Yeah.
no one
Oh
is
yeah.
has a whole career of taking big swings, but this is his biggest swing conceptually, just in terms of what he's trying to communicate. The scale of the story, the ending. I mean, the ending is a big swing with what he's trying to communicate there, and for a lot of people, it didn't work at the time, and that's why it was divisive.
You mean you?
Well,
You mean you?
I'm not
Say
the
it. Say
only
it.
one, and no, I like.
But
That's the
say
thing.
it.
No,
It didn't work for
This is
you.
listen, I had this at a 9 out of 10 on Letterboxd or IMDb or whatever since it first came out. Like, I have always been a fan of this movie, but what I'm
Yeah,
saying is just this is still his biggest swing to date. I don't count Tenet as his biggest swing because
or Dunkirk.
no, I don't think
Dunkirk
Dunkirk's even a
is
bigger swing than this. This is his
Dunkirk
biggest
is a
swing.
swing in terms of format,
Yeah.
but this is his biggest swing in terms of
Concept.
philosophy.
Philosophy
Yeah,
and concept, yeah. He's trying to do the most this is like what his brother does where, like, he likes to like
but that's
Westworld,
what I'm
it's a
saying.
big swing.
Ye
This is him
They need
taking
to
a
work
big swing
together
like that.
more.
No, they should.
They need to
They
because, like,
should.
okay, see, for people who don't know, Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan are brothers, and Jonathan essentially got a lot of sauce on TV. Like, that's the one place where, like, they essentially gave him a place to run wild with the ideas that he has. And he's going to be directing a movie very soon. But these two together, whenever they are always talking about their work together because they're brothers, obviously. And it's like these two, when they come together, whether it's, the Dark Knight trilogy, whether it's this, whether it's freaking Memento, right? Talk from the top.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, people know the story of
Memento,
like them
them driving
them
in the
going
car.
across,
Yeah.
yeah, driving across the country
Yeah.
and like, oh, here's the story. And this is a great partnership of like family, even with his wife, and this is, we can say this now, this is Sir Christopher Nolan, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And his Dame Emma Thomas, that these people, they've done the work, and it's just them as a family doing great work, but it's like the concepts and the dialogue and everything that they worked on together. It is so saucy, man.
Yeah.
I want to see more of them together.
No, I definitely and I think now that his brother is a bit out of TV jail, like he actually did the Fallout TV show, very
Yeah,
successful. I think Westworld kind of probably the first season
but
of that show is incredible. Also, I think I might have told you this, but now my uncle and my stepdad have both started watching Person of Interest randomly, which I know you love and is a Jonathan Nolan show from I think the 2000s, right?
yeah, like
Um
2010, it was like when we were in high school.
so, big win for him. I don't know how they found the show, like, out of all the shows, but they
Netflix,
are
probably.
enjoying the crap out of it. So, but all that's to say is that it's a family where they like to take big swings. And Nolan, I think, after Interstellar, got a little more conservative with his swings because of the mixed reception he got from some critics. And maybe not. Maybe that's not why he made changes. But I don't feel like he's taken a biggest. I mean, even Oppenheimer is not as big of a swing as what this was at the time in his career. It was risky to make a blockbuster with no source material that, is not a traditional blockbuster. He caught Matthew McConaughey at the right time. That was very smart. He caught, Hoyte at the right time. He got Hans still at his peak when he was still working with Hans. Like, he got the right people together, but by no means was this a guaranteed success at all.
And this is right off of Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
Inception was a success, and he was at the point where they were like, okay, this is his first like Inception was a carte blanche movie, but this is the next like Kate Blanchett movie for sure.
Kate Blanchett.
Because literally they said 20%. He got paid 20 million and 20%. To this day, if you count like the new numbers, he's made $164 million or something like that off of Interstellar.
Do you know what the budget for this movie was?
165.
Oh, you already had it. There you go.
I was reading
He
last night,
actually
you know
came
me.
in under budget. Do you know that though? He came in 10 million under.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. See, the thing about Nolan is that he shoots very few shots, but on top of that, he's always efficient.
Yeah.
And they even talk about it where it's like the shooting conditions in Iceland were so bad, and they would randomly have gusts of wind that are 80 to 100 miles per hour, and they're shooting out there. It's him and it's Matthew McConaughey, Matt Damon, and Hoyda, and like 15 other people with a shoulder rig IMAX
Oh
camera.
god, that
And
stuff looks so beautiful
it's
still
and
too.
and on top of that, they're just like, okay, now we can't shoot. Okay, what are we gonna do? They're like, okay, let's go to the parking lot, and they're getting inserts. That's Nolan's, like, that's his thing. Like, we're not gonna waste time. Let's try to get it
Well,
done.
isn't that part of the thing about being a successful blockbuster filmmaker is part of it's
Yeah,
your vision, but part of it is your organization. It's like while Spielberg was able to keep making these movies is that, I mean, I know Jaws famously had a crazy shoot, but all of his other blockbusters, typically you don't hear things about it going over budget or over time or reshoots or any of that other stuff that, I mean, shoot, Disney or
but talk
Marvel
about
can't
Ridley
make a
Scott.
movie without reshoots anymore, you know?
Talk about Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott, all the money in the world. He took 9 days and reshot an entire part of the movie. Added Christopher Plummer to his movie,
Yeah.
and like, okay, I didn't like Gladiator. Nolan loved it. It doesn't matter to me. But no, whatever. Ridley Scott talks about it with Fede Alvarez for like his little DGA conversation that I shoot with 9 cameras. I know what I'm doing. I do this so my crew can be home by like 5:30. Like we shut down at 5:30. We're done for the day. 7 o'clock, they're home. They have a life, you know?
Yeah, and well,
And
and someone
I
like
admire, but it's like, the filmmaking, like, whatever.
and someone like
There's
Ridley too, man. He's shooting almost 2 movies a year. He's doing like a Clint Eastwood impersonation
so
with how many he's
what he
doing, you know?
does what he does is literally he just finished Gladiator, right?
Yeah,
Post for Gladiator starts within 3 weeks. He has a cut of the movie to show everybody. And then he's off within 6 weeks to work on his next movie. He's already in pre-production within 6 weeks on the next movie. So he goes from next movie to next movie to next movie. He doesn't even wait for the movie to be cut. He's like,
yeah,
I'm not sitting in that room editing with you. Go start editing the movie and then we'll figure it out. I'll give you notes. And it's like he has a faith within the people that he's around. And of course he does. And he's so confident with what he does. It is so admirable and so respectable. And there's a reason why he churns them out.
yeah,
And even he talks about the script stuff too, about how, like, okay, even if the script's not good, I say yes, and then we kind of figure it out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? There's the difference of Gladiator versus Gladiator 2, right?
yeah.
Of him, with no script, and then here kind of having a script. The script's not bad, but it's not great, so it's a lot of interesting ideals.
But
But back to Nolan.
yeah, back to why
Drop,
we're
drop,
here.
drop, drop the top 5 Nolan real quick.
Oh, okay, we wanna do that now. Shoot. Okay.
Yeah, no, we just gonna drop it because
I
I want people to know where we stand. Okay, so we were talking about it literally a year ago when we did Phantom Thread. How, like, as a couple, Zach and Kat, they have their couple movie, which is like Phantom Thread. If we have a couple, like, as me and Zach, as our friendship, if we have one director that we've always loved
yeah.
through all these years, it has always been Christopher Nolan.
We've always been on
So it's like,
in sync with him. Like it's not a question. Like that's always been our guy, and it's always been. It's funny, but for someone who's our guy, we don't even talk about him that much because
no, we
we
don't.
we kind of
Because
align so
it's
much.
so
There's
innate.
nothing fun to talk about there that we're
Yeah,
pretty much aligned in terms of our thing. Now our movies are top five is going to be different, but our alignment on what he brings to the table as a director is matched.
yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
So drop the
Okay.
top 5. I'll drop mine afterwards.
Caveat, because I like to caveat things. This changes basically anytime I watch one of his movies. So this is after seeing Interstellar. This is where I'm at for his top five. Okay.
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm gonna go 5-1.
Okay.
Number 5, Inception. Love Inception. Probably lower than Vikash on it. Rewatched it a couple years ago, and I moved it way up my list. Though it used to be kind of near the middle bottom, but I have a new appreciation for it. Number 4, Memento. Watched this in high school. I saw it after The Dark Knight, but it was the second Nolan film I saw and was the one that actually really got me into him. Love it. No notes. Guy Pearce needs to be in more work. Number 3,
More good work.
more good work.
Guy
Yeah,
Pearce
he
Guy
works.
Pearce is employed,
Yeah.
but they don't employ him properly.
No,
And I
he's
say that I say that specifically,
yeah.
employ properly, because casting is half the job. And if y'all aren't casting him in good movies, then he's not there.
He
I just
gives
saw The Brutalist,
yeah.
and he better get nominated.
He
I can't say anything else. He
anytime he's
like
in
I don't
a actual movie with some substance, he kills it. Memento is a leading man performance. He should have had more after that. I
bro,
don't know why.
remember Lawless? I don't know if
Yeah,
you
he was
remember
good at
Lawless.
Lawless.
He
Yeah.
was
He
insanely
was good.
awesome.
That whole cast is good. That for some reason that movie is like should be better, but it's still good, but it's like it should be better too. It's kind of
Jessica
weird.
Chastain,
Yeah.
Tom Hardy. Keep
So
going.
okay, 3. This moved up a bunch since my last rewatch. Interstellar. Have that at 3. Now that the ending kind of clicks for me more, there's nothing I can say about this movie that I don't like. This is his biggest swing. I love it. So number 2, and I've been pretty consistent about this since I've rewatched it a few times actually.
This man,
Dunkirk.
this man.
Dunkirk.
I thought he
Dunkirk.
was about to say Dark Knight
No, no, no,
Rises.
no, no. That's actually moved down to probably that used to be higher. So
Yeah,
Dunkirk, Memento used to always be the number 2 slot for me, but I've rewatched Dunkirk so much, and every time I watch it, I'm like, critically, this is probably his best film ever. Like this is just what that does for the idea of a war film and about the empathy he has for the characters and the way he tells it. It's amazing. And then
yeah.
obviously number 1, The Dark Knight. I saw this at the right age. I think I was late middle school, maybe early high school.
2008. We were like 12.
Okay. So that's about
Yeah,
the time that most people I would say see the film that's going to be their favorite film ever. I feel like that's a thing. You see a film when you're about
yeah.
12 to 14, like that's going to be the one. And that was the one for us. Saw it in theaters. started my love for film. It's what probably started a lot of the basis of me and Vikash's friendship is just talking about, "Hey, did you see The Dark Knight?" And then just starting from there, you know?
Yeah.
So it is that's my top 5, but yeah, it's hard to pick. Like the next 5 could easily be in there if I rewatch them tomorrow, honestly.
And I've been so over on our buddy, he has the commentary podcast, Pat Brennan. Shout out. Go listen to our stuff. I'm on there always. And we have been rewatching Nolan's movies. We started a director series. It's me, him, and Martine, who was on for Blade Runner on our pod. And so I've rewatched all of his movies except Oppenheimer within the last year. And my even looking at my list right now, I'm like, I might change some of these things, but I think my five is pretty strong for like for me. It's my favorite five. So I'll go top or bottom to top.
Okay.
Number five, Batman Begins.
Oh,
I gotta
yeah.
put it there because so in the same vein of like, oh, you saw this at the right age. I saw this the first Christopher Nolan movie I watched, and I watched it incessantly on FX, and that was the reason I saw. I loved Batman growing up. I loved those movies, and it set the tone for the rest of his movies for me. I went back and I watched them, and I loved them. But keep going. That number four, Dunkirk. For me, it's a big place to put Dunkirk because I love the movie, but it's also like I don't like war movies. So it's like, why would I put it up there? But the movie argues for it so well. It is so well made. The everything about it, from the writing to the actual like physical making of it, the acting, everything makes sense. Everything about like it is Nolan's most creative movie.
And in a way, too, I didn't think about this till now. It's his most empathetic movie, which sounds weird because he's not a very empathetic filmmaker when you watch his films, but the
But he's an
yeah,
emotional
he
filmmaker
is.
though. I think
But the
yeah.
empathy piece that's in Dunkirk is outstanding because he has a lot of empathy for the boys on the beach, essentially,
Yeah.
and you really don't tie that up till the end. But that, yeah, I just
But
wanted to
it's
call that out. That's also one of his most empathetic movies.
the the thing that always comes through though, even with Interstellar, with the Dark Knight, is that it's about the faith in humanity.
Yeah,
I think Oppenheimer, comes off without it, but Dunkirk, Interstellar, and the Dark Knight, they all have certain pieces within them where he's trying to restore faith in humanity. He's like, hey, remember this. Hey, this is a possibility. Hey, this should be how we should be.
yeah.
And number three, it's Interstellar. My top three.
Thank
Usually,
you. The
anytime I say
three.
top three,
Yeah.
is it, like I can't complain. There's no complaints. There's not like I love this. Don't ask me questions. Tell me a one, two, and three. So number two, Inception. You already said I am very much higher on it because this is one of those movies that stays with me emotionally, stays with me. That end of the movie, right? That empathy you're talking about, that I am invested within this father trying to get back to his kids. That's all the story is, right? Interstellar. What is the story? Is a father just trying to get back
That's
to his
right.
kids, right?
That's
And then the Dark Knight, number one, it is Batman trying to get back to his dead girlfriend that he killed. I'm joking, but seriously, it's like The Dark Knight is fantastic.
that's
It,
gonna
see,
yeah.
it's one of my favorite movies. I don't know when a movie is gonna come along and change that. I
No,
don't think it ever will.
and I
But it's like it's one of those movies where it's like on the Rushmore. It's always gonna be there. You can't touch that one.
it's one of
That's mine.
those that me and Vikash know we could just do on this pod and probably do for, like, 5 hours, but we're almost
Which we will.
I at least
Which
I
we
don't wanna
will.
speak for him, but I'm almost afraid to do it because it's like, I don't know how I even have that conversation with you. I feel like we've had that conversation for 10 years. I don't even know how to
We'll
talk
make it
about this film
interesting.
anymore in, like, a productive way. All I can say is, like, it's just
It's awesome.
it's
It's
all
awesome. It's awesome.
yeah, it's, like,
I was telling
emotional. I
Zach
don't
this. I
have
was like,
anything
yeah.
critical, like, or, productive to say about it besides it's awesome, you know?
And okay, funny you say that because that's the last thing I'm going to talk about is that when I saw Interstellar in 2014, my biggest takeaway for the last decade is that I can never feel myself being objective about Nolan's movies after that. Because every time I like make a list or I name off a top 5 or something like that for Nolan, I'm like emotionally, I've never been as high as Interstellar. Most movies never hit Interstellar for me emotionally.
Like, from any director.
And from anybody ever.
Yeah.
So to say that that movie, because if I'm calling like we just covered Gladiator, we just covered Dawn for the Planet of the Apes, we just covered this, we're covering this, and these are all movies where I'm like, these are very emotional movies to me, and you can't really touch this. You can't tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
And Interstellar is one of those movies where my bias is out the roof. You can't tell me anything. You can't tell me anything about Inception. You can't tell me anything about The Dark Knight because I feel for these things. And Nolan is just one of those people where he has got people together and made these movies, and these ideas, they stick with me. And he was praising Ridley Scott. I praise him a little bit more because his filmography is going to change the next, how many ever decades. He's the only director, not even Spielberg, not even Marty, can go to like a Paramount and go get this much money
And
and make something that shifts the culture.
and he's still in the middle of his career. Like, I feel like he's just
Yeah.
reaching the middle, and
He's
he's
just
just
hitting
reaching
peak.
he's just reaching new heights. I mean, Oppenheimer is a something that the Nolan who made Interstellar would have not been able to make Oppenheimer, you know? Like, there is growth there
He's
too.
getting better.
Yeah.
He's getting better. And then on top of that, you tell me that the man made a movie about science, about a man who, J. Robert Oppenheimer is one of the great characters
Yeah.
of modern history. But you're going to tell me that people went and that movie almost made $1 billion. I still can't believe it. I'm like, y'all watched it? I'm like, my nerdy behind is going to go watch it. I love Interstellar because it's such a nerdy science movie. But Oppenheimer,
Well,
like, come
how
on.
many people can put out big movies like that that aren't tied to IP, or whatever? Like,
And it's just the name. You just say,
yeah.
"Oh, it's the new Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go
Like,
see it."
I mean, there's a
No
few.
one can
How
say
many
that.
directors have that? Tarantino, Nolan,
Yeah, yeah.
Scorsese, but even does your dad friend, like, go see a Scorsese movie? Like, I don't know.
When's the last movie that came out in theaters? Silence?
Well, no,
Just being
the other one, did it
Ki
Killers
Killers
didn't come out in theater?
was in theaters, but
Oh,
it
like,
wasn't like a
Apple
well,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was an Apple
You're
thing.
right, because the other one was
No
Netflix.
one's giving him the money. They're giving him money, but they're like, "Oh, it's gonna go to theater for a
Well,
little
that's what
bit. We're gonna dump
I
it
mean,
on our thing."
like, I don't even know if Spielberg has that pool anymore, which is sad because he was, like, the OG of that. He was
They
the original,
okay,
you know?
I'm gonna see Wicked tonight, but that being said, West Side Story came out 2021. They spent $100 million on that movie. It is a stellar movie, minus one individual, and that movie got no love. But then Wicked does, and it's because it's an IP. And West Side Story is an IP. What IP? It is literally Shakespeare.
Okay, but
Shakespeare, even Sondheim, Robert Wise made the original movie.
okay, you're talking about a stellar movie, but we should talk about an Interstellar movie instead,
Okay,
okay?
fine,
Let's get back
fine.
on it. Let's
Okay,
let's get this.
action is the juice. It is our first Christopher Nolan, the most juice scenes of Interstellar. Hit me with the first scene for action is the juice. I came with three today. Honestly,
3.
I ain't even gonna lie.
That
Three.
I didn't know we were breaking
You're,
the
you're
rules.
gonna do
Okay.
one of them. You're gonna do
I
one of them
know,
at
I know.
least.
Imma just start. It's the docking scene. So, I mean, I don't where do I even start with this one?
Okay,
So,
I'll tell you what Pat says. Pat's like, oh, when I was in the theater, people literally sat up and they're like, oh, like locked in.
oh, yeah.
And it is that scene.
So, what I'll say about this, just to say how much I like it, and I'll admit this, even though it sounds crazy, I have a YouTube playlist where I occasionally just throw in a bunch of my favorite scenes from movies that I can find on YouTube, and I'll just watch them. And so it's been a long time since I've seen Interstellar, but I probably have watched this docking scene like a dozen times since my
20.
last
No, I've
viewing.
seen it like 20 plus
It's
times.
like Vikash will be
Always.
over, and we'll have you like before we start a movie
Crank
or
it.
in between movies, we'll just be like, "Hey, you want to crank the docking scene real quick?" Boom. But I mean, the way that Nolan just like builds that tension where, you have man's pod not docking correctly and you keep seeing those hands or those like the feet of it try to connect
Yep.
to the station. And then, the mid speech explosion where you're like, oh crap. Like,
So that's the best part
I mean,
is that he's building tension of like we know what's happening. If he doesn't dock, the thing is
yeah,
gonna blow, and they're trying to connect to him, but they can't communicate with him, and they're trying to figure that out. And then the
yeah,
best part is what you're talking about is that he's trying to make this. You know how villains make those speeches
yeah,
where they're like, whatever, like rubbing the cat and like, oh, we're
yeah,
gonna do this. My grand plan, and he's talking about it, and he cuts him off mid sentence, and the explosion, and then there's no sound, right?
yeah,
So it's like he's ramping up the tension, and then the biggest tension, he drops out the sound, and then you're just like left in awe. And when we saw it in the theater again, silence, dead silence in the entire theater, right? And then you're locked in.
yeah. No, and this is why Nolan is at his heart an action movie director. He just doesn't make them
100%.
all the
And
time.
horror movie.
But no,
Action
but
and horror. He
he's
knows tension.
yeah, but what I'm saying, he's an action guy because what happens after that? Coops asks, it's like, Coop, what are you doing? And he says, docking.
It's
and,
impossible.
and that is an action movie. Like
It's impossible,
that's
say the
something
line.
Arnold
It's
Schwarzenegger would
impossible.
have
What does
said.
he
That's
say?
something that, any of those like Sylvester
Bro, you didn't even
Stallone, like that
say
is
the
an
line.
action movie quote. What are you
He
doing?
says he
Docking.
says doc but no, but what does Tar say? He says, "It's impossible." What does he
Yeah.
say?
On a
What
blank. What does he say?
he says it's
Oh, it's
necessary.
necessary. Yeah, yeah, that's the other
No,
piece
it's
of it. Crap.
necessary.
Yeah, it's
That's
necessary.
the best part.
And that's
Because
when
you're like, "Wait, hold up. What do you mean it's
that's
impossible?"
when
And then you say
Hans
it's
Zimmer score really starts to kick in. You have those wide shots of it spinning erratically and him trying to match the spin and do all those things with the controls. And again, might be one of Hans's best scores ever. It's not talked about as much as like, his Gladiator one and some
well,
of his others,
I,
but
this might be the most Layla movie, like
oh,
our most like
yeah.
soundtrack movie. We're gonna get into it in
We'll
a
get
minute
into that. But
because I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. I'm being real. Like I was cranking it before we
this
started because it's like this might be my most listened to
well,
score of all
this
time.
scene is the last thing I want to say about this scene is for someone who Nolan, who probably has multiple scenes in every movie that would be another director's best scene ever. This docking scene is like in his top 5 easily of Nolan's best scenes. I'm talking about him like flipping the truck and in The Dark
Yes.
Knight.
Okay.
I'm
That
talking about
and
some
then
of the plane
in
stuff
Inception, the
and
third act.
Inception, the third, yeah, some of the third act stuff. Like in terms of Nolan's best scenes, this docking scene's in that top 5, which means a lot coming from a director or for a director like him. You
Yeah.
know, so that's that's all I got to say about that. I love that scene.
And for me, I don't even need to say more because it's like the docking scene. It's like you know it as the docking scene, and there's even
Yeah,
a whole drama. I know you remember this because the soundtrack came out, and then "No Time for Caution," which is the piece that plays in this, it wasn't even out, and
yeah,
people are like, "What do you mean it's not on the
yeah.
soundtrack?"
The
And
one
no
we
one could
wanted.
listen to it for
Yeah,
months, and then we finally got it on the extended one. But it's like the effect of the scene has always been there, and every single little piece of it. And it's like if you know the science behind it and like the G's and like trying to pass out and like all the details are so well, but it actually is one of his. You say it's one of his best scenes, but it's also visually one of the greatest scenes he's ever shot
oh
too.
yeah,
Right?
oh yeah,
Because it's the mix of like those wide shots, but it's also when you get in there, it's the IMAX camera, Hoyto with the camera on
oh yeah,
him, and it's just like you're capturing a whole level of genius where it's like you feel the human element
yeah.
and you feel the stakes,
This
and it's not
movie,
like it doesn't feel like it's the end of the world, but it's like
yeah.
you're so invested within the story at that point that like you need this to happen. You know that it's do or die at this
That
point, and that's the genius.
this film probably has the most wide shots, I would reckon, for any of Nolan's movies. Maybe Inception, maybe some Dunkirk. But to be honest, the wide shots in this movies are plentiful, especially once they leave Earth. And I think that and
Masters,
it's
yeah.
purposeful because when again they're trying to dock, that wide shot of it spinning erratically just reminds you how small they are and how what they're trying to do is so difficult. Same thing when they're on man's planet. There's a lot of wide shots of the icy tundra and just like the
Yeah.
whole thing is that he keeps reminding you visually, Hoyte and Nolan, that how small they are in the face of all these challenges they're trying to overcome.
So it's like the human story is there,
Yeah.
but the epic scale of it
Yeah.
matches. So how do you tell a grand scale story and have it be an intimate story at the same time?
Yeah.
And if anybody asks me that specific question, which I think all like blockbuster movies should ask that question, point at Interstellar. Like you can point to some other movies, but Interstellar is my first one
Yeah.
because this is the this is the blueprint that you roll out as be like, how did Nolan
Hmm.
do it? And people have done it after this where they're like, oh, how did Nolan do it on Interstellar? Okay, let's do something like that. Let's do something like that.
What scenes did you
And
have?
the first one is so I didn't do this. So yesterday I was watching. I usually YouTube like Interstellar, whatever movie we watch. I try to YouTube it and just see what comes up. And this is very much like 10th anniversary. There's a lot of stuff out there. But I saw a clip of Matthew McConaughey talking, and he was talking about how he met Carl Sagan for Contact, which is a good movie, not great, but still good. And he's like, I met Carl Sagan, had 3 hours with him. This is a crazy conversation to have. And I was like, oh, God's backyard is a whole lot bigger than I thought. And he had the same reaction talking to Kip Thorne, who is a physicist and who went on to literally win a Nobel Prize in physics because of some of the work in this movie. And it's like the scene I'm talking about, obviously, is the one where it's like, as a parent, it's like, are you gonna leave your kid? And it's the countdown scene, and it's like, don't go, the whole thing with Murph in the bedroom, and the book falls off the bookshelf, and the countdown starts, and he's driving away,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's that that
Oh yeah.
that shot of the that GoPro type shot of the truck, and
Mhm.
you just see the house, the farmhouse in the back. It's one of my favorite shots of all time,
That's what that
and
they use that scene in
it's
both trailers too, the
yeah,
teaser and the first trailer, and it was the emotional height in those scenes. They kinda knew what they were cooking with there when they
oh,
shot it for sure.
100%,
Yeah.
100%, and McConaughey talks about it, and it's something for me myself too, even though I'm not even married and I don't even have
Hmm.
kids yet. But it's like it's a thing about responsibility, right? That how many times in your life are you going to have a responsibility that outweighs the responsibility you have to your family? And he talks about it like McConaughey talks about it for himself. He's like, yeah, like before I had kids, my wife was like, if you go, we go. So he's never been away from his family. They're always with him. And that matters to him, right? That's something that matters to me. And this movie is an argument of about altruism and your responsibilities. Should you leave your kids or not? And it ends up being that he ends up leaving his kids, but he gets back to him. And this is like the one argument that I see that's viable. But that scene itself, it brings up a lot of thought and a lot of emotion. I think I was tearing up watching this scene this time around, and then I was tearing up obviously watching maybe four other scenes in the movie, but this one hit even more, even better in IMAX, like in the IMAX rewatch, because it's like there's a lot more. Like the first 40 minutes of this movie, I think, is about, is this man really going to leave his kids? Is he really going to leave Earth? Is he really going to do this?
Yeah.
And it's like he sees the responsibility he has, but then he also sees the responsibility that he's been given, right?
Yeah.
Because it's almost like Nolan, I don't know if Nolan's a religious person, but it feels so like he uses the gravity and is like, putting the coordinates and all this stuff. It feels like there's a force at hand, and he kind of makes it out to be aliens, but it's not aliens, it's actually just Cooper himself. And there's all these elements at play that are interesting. I'm not going to dive into it, but it's like it's one of those scenes that always comes back to me. And that's one of my favorite scenes because the scene affects the entire movie, right? And Nolan is great when he comes back to intercutting stuff, but when he gets to Tesseract and he's cutting back to the room and it's Jessica Chastain, like when the two like plots come back, is pure genius.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna talk about the other one
Which
because
one?
it's just a it's a memory thing too, which is Miller's Planet,
Oh yeah.
which is that Zach can tell you, he can attest to it, that like my mind was blown
Yeah.
when I saw that the first time, and he's like, "No, those are mountains." I
Let
was
let
dead.
me let
I
me
was
let
done.
me set that. I don't know if I've told it on this pod yet, so I'll forgive me if I have. But I remember sitting there with
It's
him.
the Interstellar pod. This is the time to tell the
This
story,
is
bro.
it is. So we were sitting there. We were watching Interstellar. It was the first time any of us have seen it, obviously in the theater, 2014. And we get to Miller's Planet, and the big mountains in the background and whatever. And then they get to the part where you realize, oh, that's not mountains, that's waves. He says that, and I remember. I don't know why I looked, but I remember it shocked me. But I never do this, but I looked to the side at him when they said that, and I remember his mouth was just like
Yeah,
wide open, like jaw, like literal jaw dropped. Like he was literal jaw dropped watching that. And I was like, oh, this is a special movie. Like if it has, this man's seen a million movies.
yeah.
Even back then, he's seen a million movies. And I'm like, but he's seeing something new that's making his jaw literally drop in the theater. This is a special movie.
And you talk about everything with that scene, man. Just the entire, like, yeah, there's a whole science element of like, oh, like we need to make this time count. It is the most tension filled scene
Yeah,
besides a docking scene, right? And every little tick is a day, right? And it just keeps going, and it ends up being that it took what, like 30 years. It's like 1 hour is 7 minutes, or
yeah,
1 hour is 7 years on that planet because of
yeah,
the science. And it goes from like being a tension filled scene to being a horrifying one. And then we obviously get to him seeing his kids, and it becomes heartbreaking. And it's people argue that no, number one, Nolan is not emotional, and number two, that he might not be funny. And I think this is one of his most funny movies, and it's definitely his most emotional movie to date. So,
It's
and I think all of his great movies, like all the ones I talked about, like the top four, like Dunkirk, yeah, Dunkirk, Dark Knight, Inception, and Interstellar, all very emotional movies. And he knows what he's doing. That's all I'm saying. And it's like we all know what Nolan's doing, and Nolan is very much just we got to put respect on the man's name because we haven't forgotten how great he is. And I think some people forgot, and people seeing this movie again, it's changing the opinions, man. I'm glad for it.
You know, and I think what's important too is that I think it's smart when movies set up a set of stakes and then immediately raises the stakes into where you're in unknown territory. Like before
Yeah,
then, you're kind of like, okay, he's going to do this thing. Might take 10 years. He can come back. Like it's not the end of the
yeah,
world, or maybe even less time. Like, and then when that happens, it's like, oh, we're off the beaten path now. Like, I don't
yeah,
know where this movie's going to go now because now it's just been, I don't know how many years, like 30 years or whatever it was.
yeah,
Um, like, oh, so he's already past the point of being able to quickly save the earth. Now the people on earth, his children, have lived through the last 30 years of it continuing to decay. And now he has nothing new to give them, no new information. The planet was a failure. Oh, the stakes are higher, and we also don't know how they're going to figure this crap out because
yeah,
it's too late almost. At that point it's like too late. And then you throw in all the Michael Caine stuff after too, and it's like, oh, like the stake, no one keeps rising the stakes. He does this in Interception super well too. It's continuing
yeah.
to rise the stakes. Never take your foot off the pedal of increasing the stakes throughout the movie.
And he uses the classic rule is if it can go wrong,
Yeah.
let it go wrong.
Yep.
And when they get to the planet, it goes wrong. And what does Cooper say? He's like, we were not ready for this. We were
Yeah.
not prepared for this. And it's like, oh, she just got to the planet and she literally probably just got swept away and they showed up.
Yeah.
That's all that happened. And it's
Yeah.
like, even if you just think about that for like 3 seconds, that's
Yeah,
horrifying.
it
So
is. Yeah.
I love it. But we're gonna get into the production value
Okay.
because production value. This movie is impressive on all ends. And talking about those great artists, whether it's a shot, moment, scene, an aspect to this movie where everything follows like it was left on screen, nothing on the sidelines, I'd argue the whole movie. But what screams production value for Interstellar?
Yeah, I mean, I could have gone any number of ways. It could have gone with the CGI aspects of it. I could have gone with Hoyte. I could have. I mean, shoot, there's an argument that Nolan himself is the production value on this movie, but I want to give it
Yeah,
to Hans Zimmer. Something about Hans is that he always, even if I know there's jokes about him like reusing his scores and that sort of thing, but I never really like that. I think he always goes into a movie with new ideas and tries to find something new to pull out of it. And this is by far his most emotional score I've seen in a movie to date. He is just in sync with knowing how to pull the strings of the audience emotionally in this. Specifically, like the scene you brought up where Coop is pulling away from the house in his truck and you see him crying. Like when that score hits, it's because, I mean, what we're seeing on screen is heartbreaking, but his score brings it to another level. Every emotional point of this movie, the emotional highs and the emotional lows, Hans can dial it up the right amount to pull the heartstrings a bit, but never feel cheap, never feel unearned. Just complement what we're seeing on screen. And I if you take every movie he's ever done, full track list, and put them next to each other, you would have a good argument for this being his best one.
100. No, it definitely is his best work, and it's like Lion King is in theaters right now, literally, and whatever. Like, I love that score. It's one of the first ones he did, but the value of Interstellar, I think, even in the culture, is much higher because it's one where you don't even have to have seen the movie, but this composition, if I'm scrolling through the any app I'm scrolling through, I am almost guaranteed at some point to hear the Interstellar score because it's one where this music it dials you in.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna talk about it in the layout. I'm gonna pull out the red carpet for it. But this score right here, if you want to talk about production value, there's scores that you hear where you're like, oh, this changes the movie. I was talking about Gladiator. It changes the movie. It
Phantom Thread.
elevates it into
Phantom Thread's a
Phantom
big
Thread.
one for it too, yeah. And
And it's
Gladiator,
like
you're right, but that's another Hans one, yeah.
where it's like you hear it and it's like you can't imagine a world without it. The movie doesn't exist without
Yeah.
this, you don't feel the umph of it without it.
And I mean, even
And
Inception's like that too. Like,
$100%.
Hans has a knack for inserting his music into these movies and making them almost you can't imagine the movie without it
But
existing. They exist together and they don't make sense without each other.
it's like Nolan is definitely a key part of it,
Mhm.
especially with this one. I'll talk
Yeah.
about it. But for me, for production value for Interstellar, I'm going to talk about a few things. But the first thing is the scale of this movie. I said it's, emotionally and physically, you feel like you've been there and back.
Yeah.
Because when I got out of the theater, a couple weeks ago, after we saw Interstellar, I felt like my soul was vibrating. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the sound, but it's also like just everything about this movie. It feels earned.
Dude, I
It's
had
it's
that
this feeling you
same
get when you
feeling.
when you watch Lord of the Ring.
No, like,
See,
it's how long
that's
it's been since I've been to a movie and I came back in my head I can't stop thinking about it. Like, my
yeah.
head's racing, like, I've seen a lot of good movies this year, but, like, even at movies my favorite movie of the year so far, Nora, I didn't think about it like I thought about Interstellar when I was done with it, you know?
Sing Sing is one
See,
for
but I
me.
know, but I'm just saying, like, I
Yeah.
didn't think about Dune 2 the way I'm thinking about Interstellar when I
No.
was done with it. Like, it's been so long since I've had like, I literally was like, "I need to calm down. I'm not gonna go to bed tonight because all I can do is think about this movie," which I've seen multiple times. I've seen before,
Yeah.
but you're right. It's like your
But
soul, it has like you had like a buzz on your soul when you're done with it. Like, it's so
the
exciting.
production value of this movie is that you are chasing this feeling from
Yeah.
after you watch this movie, and if you've been lucky enough and blessed enough to see this movie in IMAX, and the full proper like feeling of it, that you chase this for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, a bunch of dudes got together and made that, then it's like, oh, can I do that? I think we all have the potential to do this, but
I can't do that.
emotionally,
I can't do
I no, no, no,
that.
I can. Most definitely I can do this. But it's like you feel it's like, oh, here's the bar. The bar has been set.
Yeah.
Go chase this. And it's like you're chasing it as an audience, you're chasing it as an artist, you're chasing it as everything where it's like that high, that feeling is like this is why movies exist, right? And in every single way, people are like, oh, movies aren't political. They've always been political. There's always a message there. There's always an emotion there. When movies are good, they deliver. And this movie delivers every single aspect of production value. And that's why when it gets to the end, talk about the Tesseract. I'd like who is gonna like you're gonna tell me that Nolan thought of this. This is Nolan, this is not Jonathan that thought of this. And he's like, oh, there's a four-dimensional space and there's a bunch of mumbo jumbo, science behind it, where it's like, oh, there's a physical space where the 40 space has been
Yeah.
sparsed into him being able to physically go behind and go into this room that his kid has and all this sort of stuff. But it's like he brings the science fiction of it all back to the human
But,
emotion.
okay,
And
who also had to
literally
do
they
that? Who also had to do that a few years after, try to show that 4D space in a way that was understandable? Because this is what's kinda interesting now that you bring that up. We did a pod on it too. It's one of our first few pods.
Oh, Arrival?
Yeah. Think
Oh,
about it,
okay.
the ending of
No, I
this
was thinking
and what
okay, so
Arrival's
Arrival
doing,
is
they're doing
great,
the
but
same thing, but they're doing
this is
it
a
2
little
different
bit better
ways.
than Arrival.
No, no, I
Yeah,
agree, I think it is, but I think it's
but it's like the edit like Arrival is amazing,
no, but I'm
and what
saying
it
there
does, the editing,
you bring up
fantastic.
that 4D space at the end.
Yeah,
Arrival has their way of showing it with the intercutting, the way they do it within
yeah,
the beautiful score playing over it, and Nolan's way of doing it, which makes sense with him, is a little bit more visual. Like,
physical.
he
Yeah,
and physical. Like, he wants to physically show you what it would be like to, to see time as another plane that we can perceive. And Arrival did it in a way that actually more except not they don't show the you like no one shows the character seeing this. Arrival shows it to the audience. There's a
yeah,
difference there. Like, we don't see Amy's Adams character really perceiving it. Like, we do a little, but with Interstellar,
but it's
it's
like it's
like
the editing.
Coop is
Yeah,
seeing it, and we're seeing it through Coop instead of just the editing and Arrival. We're just seeing it, and that's
yeah,
not to say one's better than the other. But I wanted to make that call out because that's the only 2 times I can think of someone trying to show this phenomenon on film. Like, I'm sure there's others, but
but this is the
Primer might
best.
have done a little bit of it, maybe, but kinda. So, but you don't see this. This is kind of a new concept still to try to
I
understand.
compared this to the end of Contact, but this is a better ending. Much, much, much better ending here. It's like Contact didn't have they didn't have it yet. If they made that movie like 10 years later, it would have been better. But
That would be a
I'm gonna
fun
talk
one
about
for us to do at some point, you know?
We'll talk about it.
Yeah,
We'll talk about it. But the Tesseract, I just want to point out everyone working on this movie because these are typically the people that Nolan keeps working with.
yeah,
George Cottle, he's a second unit director, but he's also the stunt guy. So all the stunts you see in Interstellar, all the way to he's done so many of these iconic things that Nolan has done. And he was like, yeah, it was 3 weeks having Matthew McConaughey inside of the Tesseract is the longest 3 weeks of my life
I'm
because
sure.
it was that hard to do.
Was
And
it
they have
just
like 15 they have 15 projectors everywhere, and like you can the running lines, some of that stuff is actually real. And
really?
15 like 2K massive projectors, just some of them are just like sitting on the ground, just motioned up and tilted, and like, okay, that's how we're gonna do
So,
this.
I assumed it was all green screen, so you're telling me
No,
they
no,
had
no, no.
some. Did
Practical
you
set. I'll
and so
send you
you
the thing.
just watched the Interstellar documentary,
Yeah,
or yesterday, right?
last night. Again, I've seen it
So,
like 3 times, but
how
yeah.
how did they have him on a rig? Like, was he
Yeah.
floating on
So
a
they
rig?
have this
Okay.
yeah, he's like 20 feet in the air, and then they have the whole set laid out. I will probably overlay this, and you'll see him just going around. He has a stunt double. They practice, they do it again, and he had a physical space where it's like so Nolan was like, okay, like Matthew, I was telling Matthew about this and trying to, give him the concept of it, but you're not going to know what this is till you actually get in there and then you have a place to work. And then, he can bring the emotion
Well,
to it. And
that's
he
what I was
really
thinking. That's
does.
one of the most challenging scenes I'm sure Nolan's ever filmed because he's such
Yeah.
a he wants the actors to have that physical playground, that physical toolbox. And
Yeah.
with that scene, it's like almost impossible to give an actor any sort of
Oh,
grounding, you know?
he
So
had
that's
it.
tough.
He
And
had it.
and you gotta explain it to them right. Or I mean, an actor can only do great actors can do whatever, but that's gotta be tough as an actor too, trying to
Oh, yeah.
hey, this
But
concept of
what,
time is a 3D element, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what he does for his actors is, okay, put it this way. People who use a lot of green screen, some of them use big sets.
Yeah.
Rarely, let's say James Gunn, rarely in big budget senses they don't use those. But a lot of them just put blue screen, green screen, and they're like, here, act. And that it sucks
Yeah.
because it's like they're as a filmmaker, they're not like the production is not respecting the actors, but it's like Nolan always goes out of his way to respect his actors.
Yeah.
And Scott Fisher, his special effects supervisor, everything from the visuals of Oppenheimer's mind to everything in this movie, special effects, he's doing that. Paul Franklin from Double Negative, VFX special visual effects supervisor. He literally worked with Kip Thorne with this. They made the real visual of a black hole for this movie, and it took them I think it took 20 hours to render one frame of 24 frames of a black hole.
I got that
They
that's
went
one
to
of
the
the
science
frames I
with that.
have, so when they put out the
Yeah.
DVD, and I know because Vikash got one, he might have actually got me my copy. I don't know,
Oh, yeah.
but
The film?
yeah,
Yeah.
but they came with little film strips, and so I have a film strip of the black hole. Like, it would just be a random
Yeah.
film strip from the movie, and I got fortunate that
Yeah.
I got the one of the black hole. It's really I don't know where it is, but it's really freaking cool to have.
And that's why it's like he works with a lot of the same people, but he's the one who's pushing them.
Yeah,
And the last thing I want to talk about with production value is the change that happened between The Dark Knight Rises to Interstellar was one very specific, massive thing. And that was his cinematographer. And
yeah.
Zach's talked about Hoyte van Hoytema like
Oh,
5 times
he's
already, just off
fantastic.
the cuff. Because Hoyte, I remember watching her,
Yeah,
and we're gonna talk about her at some point.
mm,
And her, after I saw that, I was like,
2013,
oh, like it's
I
unforgettable
think.
visual experience for me. Where I'm like, I was thinking about life differently. After I saw Interstellar again, I was thinking about life differently. And the way that Hoyte shoots compared to what Wally Pfister did, Wally Pfister's a great cinematographer, kind of retired now from that work, but Hoyte elevated Nolan's game.
Yeah, yeah,
They're like a perfect pairing of like, I'm crazy, you're also crazy, let's work together.
yeah,
And they keep one upping each other together.
yeah,
And they're like, oh, how do we use the IMAX format? Or so Hoyte and Nolan, when they made this movie, so they used the Dark Knight Rises, they used a lot of IMAX where they could, but it was planned. On this movie, Hoyte was like, and Nolan, they're like, okay, let's just keep the IMAX camera with us. If we can shoot it on IMAX, we shoot it on IMAX. And that changed their game forever.
yeah, and there was no disrespect to Wally at all, but when you see
No, no,
Hoyte
no.
come in, it's I mean, look at Interstellar, look at Dunkirk, and then look at all of Nolan's movies before that.
Tenet
Ten I mean,
and
even Tenet,
Oppenheimer. Oh my
I was just
gosh.
talking about the 2, 2 of the ones that he worked on right after, right? And then
Yeah.
compare it to, I mean, even Inception, Dark Knight, Memento, like, I know Memento is way early, but, like,
But
there is a
yeah,
clear difference in cinematography there that is
it's a
notable, and
lighting difference
and
too.
it and it got Nolan almost to this next phase of his career where he could do spectacle, because if you think about it, before Interstellar, maybe before I guess Inception was a little bit of a spectacle, but the heights that he reaches in terms of spectacle in Tenet, Interstellar, Oppenheimer, Dunkirk would not have been achieved unless Hoyte never came along. And he's one of
100%.
our best cinematographers right now, like hands down.
It's him. It's Roger Deakins,
Yeah.
Emmanuel Lubezki, Chivo,
Yeah.
and then there's other great ones out there. Of course, there's great people out there, but
Yeah.
those three, I always come back to their work. And
Yeah.
but mainly Roger Deakins and Hoyta and Greg Fraser, who recently shot the Batman. He just shot Dune Part Two. I've been a fan for a decade plus for him. But these people, when they get behind the camera, they bring something to to that. And one of the production values very much is Hoyta was like, "Oh, I'm gonna put the IMAX camera on my shoulder, and I'm gonna do the shoulder rigging
Yeah.
for this. It's the first time anybody's done it. I don't think anybody else has done it." And he put the team on his
God
back
bless that
when he
guy's
came to the
shoulder, man.
production.
That's a heavy
And
camera.
Nolan jokingly, he's like, "You're like, he's a strong guy." And of
Yeah.
course he is. And it's like you're wading through water, you're
Yeah.
doing this in the ice, you're doing this 80-mile-per-hour wind, and he's doing it himself. And
Yeah.
I love cinematographers that actually put the camera on themselves, like, okay, let me shoot this myself.
Yeah.
There's it's like you feel the emotional intimacy of like, oh, I know Hoyta got that shot. I know
Yeah.
he did this. And it's like there's a love there. You can know that he wants to do it,
Yeah.
and there's a production value of like, it's just amazing work. It really is visually amazing work. This is the bar. You want to talk about somebody's career to study?
Yeah.
Hoyte van Hoytema is one of those guys.
For sure.
So dialogues. This movie has fantastic dialogue. I love the dialogue in Interstellar. What pieces of dialogue affected you the most? Drop me into dialogues for one of the best movies I've seen in a long time.
Sure. So I put a lot of this in my letterbox review, so I'll summarize
Yeah.
it a little bit. But the one that struck me this time was when Matthew McConaughey says, "Once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your children's future." So this kind of goes into the ending of the movie starting to click for me. I finally understand like what Nolan's motivation for this film seems to be, and what it seems to be is him grappling with the world we're leaving behind for future generations, and like how to fix the path we are on for leaving a worse world for the future. Like that's what the path we're on right now is. And I think at the time people made fun of Nolan for the love transcends time thing and all that. But in reality, I think what Nolan saw was that we aren't doing enough to save the earth for future generations. And this thesis is that we can't save the world if we don't do it out of love, because we surely aren't going to save it for profit.
Yeah. That thing I was watching with Matthew McConaughey, he talks about it that my like acting doesn't really mean much to me. Like I can do these things that I can, be in the world and have effect out there. I know I can, but the thing that matters to me the most is my kids. That the greatest thing I can do is make sure that my kids, I've raised them well, and then they have a path and they have, the know all of how to live life and how to be a good human being. And that affects the future, right? And I agree. Like I like the dialogue of the, becoming a ghost, but that ghost, like we're all, he does it in the movie. He's trying to give a lesson, trying to give some sort of, wisdom, and that wisdom should make a difference,
Well,
right? Like why, like because a lot of people nowadays aren't having kids
yeah,
anymore, and I understand why, but it's like the people who are, I don't, okay, I'm not gonna get into all that, but like there's a whole thing of, why do it? It's to make sure that there are still human beings out there that do have that love and spread that love, and that pessimism isn't getting to the world, because this movie very much starts in a pessimistic world, right? Like
yeah.
we're at the end of this time on Earth, and I'll talk about why I don't agree with that later. But keep going.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's all I'm just trying to say is him saying that we're the ghosts of our children's future. That's really Nolan again, just talking it's why he made this movie. He's telling you, "This is why I made the movie, is that I'm worried about my children's future, and I'm worried that no one has any interest to save their future except love. Unless you have love, unless you have that love for your children to survive and thrive." And if you kind of look at what the state of the world's been the last while, you don't see people making decisions out of love. It's out of profit, it's out of greed, it's out of self-survival,
Ego.
ego,
Yeah.
good one. And I mean, man, for instance, what's his decision making out of? Self-survival. When Michael Caine's character is holding information from Coop that we find out later in the movie, some of that is his ego. Some of that is this false sense of trying to tell everybody things are, not to give people bad news. Like there's a lot of motivations there, but none of the motivations of any of those characters, except for Coop, is out of love. Oh, and Dr.
And
Brand.
Amelia, yeah.
Yeah, Amelia. So,
And what is
and
I'm
the
gonna cut
characters
right
who
to it.
make
You're
decisions,
saying it.
yeah. The characters who
Yeah.
make the decision out of love are the ones who find success in this movie, and it's not an accident. Like, that is Nolan's
And
whole
it's not
purpose of this.
it's and it's not like, all the success is happy, right? It's bittersweet.
Yeah,
And that's also another element of love that, or at least true love, where it's like, oh, he gets back to his daughter, but she's about to die. Like Amelia, she gets back to the planet where her lover, who literally went to another planet to try to save humanity, is, and he died, right?
yeah.
And now she's just hoping and waiting that they come and find her, right? There's different things about it. And what is, Amelia Brandt, Anne Hathaway's character, what does she say? And it's the most criticized thing about this movie to this day, is that love is the one thing we're capable of perceiving that transcends time and space. And when I tell you, that's something I've thought about a lot, you know, per the past decade, because I believe that science is a way of quantifying the things that we have in this world. It always has been, but there's forms of energy in this world we will never be able to quantify. And the only quantification and value of love is what this movie talks about, is that there's an inherent, or I would hope that there's an inherent goodness behind love and that emotion, and what we will do for it can be, some people can do bad things with that emotion, but this movie is very much like, oh, be logical with your love, understand what it is, and try to be better in this world about it. And he doesn't say all this stuff outright, but that's what Nolan's trying
Well,
to say.
and
I ascribe to it.
what does Coop keep saying? He keeps saying, "I'm trying to do this so I can get back to my kids. I want to get back to my
Yes.
kids." And they even talk about it in the movie that, like, with them transcending love, transcending time, they give context to it within the movie. They say, it's, or Dr. Mann says it when he's talking about his bull crap earlier in the movie, where he's just like, you have the desired, when he's beating the crap out of him in the snow, and
Yeah.
he's like,
No,
you have
like,
this,
no, it's when
you have this desire
he's
to see
literally
your
on the
kids,
ground and he's dying,
it's the strong,
right?
it's what's driven you this whole time, is your desire to see your kids again. And again, that's love. He even says it in his monologue when he's on the last planet. He's like, yeah, you're gonna see your kids again faces before you die, because you have this instinctual, you know pull to see them again. That's been your motivation. So again, man doesn't have that motivation, and he dies. The characters without that motivation die. Like, it's very meaningful.
I hate to bring this up, but I want to talk to you about it. So my Dr. Mann, Matt Damon's character, the way that he's thinking, it reminded me of Don't Look Up from Adam McKay. You know how at the end of that movie the rich people escape and like they just end up dying or whatever?
Yeah.
They escape off of Earth. And it felt like the same thing. And I don't believe that if you think that you're saving humanity, whether it's for ego, whether it's, you think you're doing something better and you're not caring for the humans that exist already in the first place, there's something wrong there.
Well, and that's a good point. So
And this movie handles it good
that's the
compared to
division
Don't Look Up.
between
I don't like Don't Look Up.
that's the division between Michael Caine's character, Dr.
Yeah.
Man, and Coop. They don't care about the current people who are there, because they're doing it out of this scientific ideal of, well, we got to save the human
Or the
race.
betterment of our
They're not doing it
species.
out
It's
of
like,
they're not doing it out of love. Honestly, they're doing
why
it out of
why is
ego.
Earth ruined?
They're doing it out of ego.
Why is Earth ruined?
Yeah.
The humans ruined the Earth.
They've
The Earth
already
was a gift,
well,
and you're saying that
they've
the
already
best
given up
solution is
on
to
them.
leave?
They've given up on them. They've
Bro.
given up on their kids, their loved ones, whoever. They've given up on them, and it's almost like they act like they're doing it for the betterment of mankind, but it's really ego. I'm the one who can fix this, and this is how I'm going to fix it. Fuck everybody else. Like, that is their ego talking. That's not real. it's cold. Again, there's no love in that decision making. There's no it's very cold, scientific, and ego driven.
Yeah. And it's like and that's why the message of the movie will always stay true no matter what happens, because I think things are always going to get worse, but there's also going to be good people. There's always going to be a love there. And the message of this movie specifically is, I think it pairs with Oppenheimer interestingly well, but this movie specifically about like love transcending time, that is always something where people are going to come back to be like, oh dang, bars. Like Nolan was onto something, and as the years go, people are going to be like, oh, that's what he was talking about. It's like, oh, things are going to get bad, but
Yeah,
it's like, love is like one of the only ways we're going to be able to prevail.
yeah.
Do you have any dialogues?
That was my dialogue. What's yours?
So I did want to say this when we were watching the movie. There's I think it was Tars was saying something, and no, and Zach he looks at me. He's like, "Yo, people say Nolan's not funny."
I can't remember what it was, but yeah, the
It
Tars
was
character is really funny. It's maybe the
Bill
humor
Irwin.
light when the light turns on. Yeah,
Yeah, you know how Bill Irwin. You know who Bill Irwin is? You should look him up afterwards.
yeah, I
But
know.
he's an actor, and he's the one who actually did the puppeteering. And
Yeah,
it's awesome that they had him there, and he brings such a comedy and a levity to Tars, and it's awesome.
let's be real,
And
man. If I said, "Hey, Nolan's new movie is gonna have an R2D2 type sidekick, C3PO
worse than
sidekick,"
R2D2.
yeah,
It's he
you would
doesn't
be
even call him
like,
a robot. It's like a block,
yeah.
and that's the
But
whole
I'm just saying,
intention
if
of it.
anybody, if I told you that, you'd be like, "What the hell is Nolan doing? Why is he
Yeah,
robot sidekick in his movie?
yeah.
Really?" And no, it works. It totally works. It's a good character and it adds to the film and it has some emotionality and humor. Like it just works.
And McConaughey's the one who was like
Yeah,
calling him. He's the one who started the whole slick thing. Like, hey,
yeah,
slick.
yeah,
And like brings a whole like, yeah, there's obviously dialogue that like Nolan wrote with him, but
yeah,
like the whole sauce was supposed to be better,
yeah,
like because he added it. It's awesome.
yeah.
But the other one of my favorite lines is, Timothy Chalamet doesn't get much to work with in this movie, and he chooses it when he does, because when the cornfield chase happens, he's like, "The tire is flat." He's like, "The tire," and
Yeah.
I'm just like, it kills me every time.
I
But
I didn't
I'm,
know he was in this movie until
oh,
we
I
watched
know.
it again. I totally forgot. Like, because I guess 10 years ago,
Your mind was
there
blown
was
when you saw that,
well,
man.
yeah,
I was like,
Timothy
yeah. I was like,
Chalamet was just not a known quantity back then, and now he's, like, one of the biggest actors in the world, so it's really funny just seeing him show up for, like, 10 minutes as, like, the brother. Yeah.
I think he was in Hostiles, and
Was he?
uh,
I
yeah,
saw
yeah.
Hostiles. Okay.
And then Lady Bird, obviously,
Yeah.
and, like, that's when I was like, "Oh, it's
That's
the
when
kid
you
from Interstellar." He kept being the kid from Interstellar, and then now he's Timothy
for me, it
Chalamet, but
was
I was like,
Lady Bird, and then it was what was the other one she made? It was
"Little
also Schwarzenegger,
Women,
Little Woman, yeah.
bro,
I blanked.
jeez."
I love Little Women, but those are the 2 where I was like, "Okay, I need to pay attention to this guy. Like, he's actually, like he's got something." Yeah.
But see, the dialogue in this movie is it's so funny for me, and I think it's a comedy thing where I talk about it all the time, that I think Nolan is hilarious, and the comedy that he brings to his scripts, the comedy that his brother brings to it, is always something I love to see. And I already said it before, I would love for for Jonah and for Chris to work together again, because I think they're very interesting with the concepts, but they also have really good comedy, and they always have fun.
Yeah.
And these movies, they're all serious movies, but I think it's very much like a real life thing where it's like serious moment, comedy, they go right together. They should be together. It should be like a separate thing. So
No, and I mean, unless he's doing an ultimately serious movie like a Dunkirk, which has a couple bits of
Oppenheimer,
comedy at point.
Oppenheimer's serious too, but it's
There's
funny. It's
there's a moment
hilarious.
or 2 of humor in that though,
Oh
but
yeah,
yeah, just serious. And he actually does better when he makes a serious movie and then drops like an inch of like comedy into
comedy.
it, like with Interstellar or like, I mean, Tenet had its funny parts, but I would argue it's less funny than something like maybe Inception, which is,
Yeah, that's true.
maybe
No, that's true.
it's not in your face when it's trying to be funny. It's just very much like, oh, Tom Hardy said this line in a, Dream
Yeah,
Digger,
great way.
it's like it's funny and it's also works in the context of the movie.
One of my favorite lines is the hot sauce line, like,
Yeah.
I ordered
Uh,
my hot sauce an hour ago. And then he
that's the
goes
one I was
inside, he's
thinking
like
of.
pummeling
Yeah.
dudes' faces with a trees grater. Great action, So put
I'm not
this
I'm not wearing hockey pads. In The Dark Knight always kills me.
Bro, it's one of the best. See, that's what I'm saying. Nolan is funny, and that's
Yeah,
that's half my memorable dialogue for Nolan. Half of it's funny, half of it's serious, right? It's like, oh,
yeah.
you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain, right? To see yourself become a villain, and then the other half is like, I'm not wearing hockey pads. But that being said, let's talk about the Layla, the best needle drop or use of score for this movie. And I was talking about it. I mean it. This is a very like ethereal Church of Cinema, the organ. Like this is a very important score. Talk about what really popped off for you when it comes to Interstellar. Because you about to say something Diamond Absolute already know. It is facts.
No, you're about to you might get mad at me. I'm swerving on you on this one. I'm doing a complete
Wow.
swerve. So when I
Wow.
already talked about Hans Zimmer, his incredible score a little bit. Actually, I my needle drop for this movie, my Layla, is actually not a score, but is the poem that they put when they are taking off into the wormhole. It's when Michael
Do not
Caine
yeah.
reads, "You're not going to that good night." Rage, rage against the dying of the light. That is a needle drop, even though it's not a song. It's a needle drop of literature. It's a needle drop in its own right, where what that does is it successfully raises the stakes. There's a good. I'm
But
trying to remember
doesn't
this the
doesn't
other
Michael
day.
or not Michael Mann, but Dr. Mann, he
Ethan Ethan Hawke has this quote where he talks about what's the need for poems,
art,
what's
yeah.
the need for art,
Yeah.
and you might have seen this, but where he talks about, it's when it's not just something you need every day, but it's when you experience something and you think, has anybody experienced this before, either in a good or a bad way? And I'm summarizing what he says, but he basically says that, and he talks about how the need for literature and for poems is for when you experience something that no one else has been able to, or you want to know, can someone else ever felt what I'm feeling right now? And so the needle drop of putting that, I think it's a Robert Frost poem.
No, it's
No,
Dylan
no,
Thomas.
it's Dylan Thomas.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dylan Thomas. So dropping the Dylan Thomas poem in there is significant because it is Nolan also trying to show, it's like, how am I supposed to convey this feeling of going into the unknown like this? I could use a score, but that still doesn't quite capture what I want. I
Yeah.
want to really capture, and what captures this feeling but this Dylan Thomas poem. All that's to say is that's my needle drop, because it's not something you would have thought of. Not many movies really drop a poem into it, and if they do, it's usually a little obnoxious. This is
Yeah.
one of the few times I've noticed it actually
It's
working.
genuine, yeah.
Yeah, it's very genuine, and it's in the trailer too, and it's like
They
goosebumps.
it's so much so important that they have it on the album for the movie where it's like
Yeah,
John Lithgow says it, it's like Jessica Chastain, they have, like, lines from different
yeah,
actors that saying it all together,
and of
and
course, Michael Caine reading it is just like, come on, man,
yeah,
like,
forget about it.
yeah.
But
So,
I'll say the other half because
okay,
the score, this is
yeah,
legitimately one of the best scores
but what's
ever
your
made.
needle drop score? Like, what's your which one
My
would you
needle
pick?
drop is gonna be "Stay" because that's the one that always
Yeah,
works for me. When
that's
he
yeah,
is zooming through when he's zooming through the Tesseract for the first time and or like he
the
realizes the
bookcases.
moment of like, I'm here to serve my daughter, that I am only doing like my only function now is to just do this. And when
Yep,
he's like zooming through trying to find the room to find the right time to tell her now, and he's like Tars, you don't understand. And it's like that score starts playing, and instantly I was crying. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I'm realizing within the moment what Nolan is trying to tell with this movie emotionally, and the that emotion hits with that scene. But I'm gonna zoom out from that though. Go ahead.
I was just saying, low key. Also, do you have more scores to talk about? Because I just thought of one I wanted to call out.
No, no, no. Talk about it first.
Well, the cornfield chase,
Yeah,
when they're chasing the drone and that plays, it reminds me of, do you remember the score from the beginning of Tron before they
yeah.
go into the Tron world and they're on the
You're talking about
motorcycle?
Flynn lives, not Flynn
Yeah,
lives.
from
Son of Flynn. Son of Flynn.
yeah, and then he's on the motorcycle
So,
and it's like, very yellow
okay,
and
anybody
dark.
listening, the reason I
Yeah,
know that is because I've
yeah.
listened to the Tron score that much.
I know you love the Tron score. I knew you'd be able to tell me. The cornfield chase and that Tron score to me are very similar in that level of excitement, exploration. It comes early in a movie. It's during a chase in a vehicle. Like, they're very similar to me. But it also it's not like the most memorable score of the whole movie, but it's one of my favorite in this movie.
It's like Nolan's filmography, right? Even the
Yeah.
worst, the quote unquote worst one is still like
Well, it
awesome.
didn't need to go that hard, you know?
Yeah.
It's 10 minutes into the movie and it's like, "Oh, shoot, like, this is
And
already like
the
a score." Yeah.
literally when that note that they're playing like doo, 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 that note
Yeah.
is literally just I think they're playing it's not an oboe. I think it might have been not a clarinet, but something longer.
Yeah.
And they're playing woodwinds, and literally some of that is just like Hans is like, okay, just blow on it, just like,
Yeah.
just like, and it's just like, and then you hear the raws of them like
Yeah.
playing, and they're like, "Doo, doo, doo, doo," and I was just like, bro, like Hans cooked on this. It's like you could
Yeah.
see the raw, like the what he took, and then how he made it into the score that we all know and love today. It is
Yeah.
something else,
It's like
and
a sense of positive exploration. That's what it, like, comes off. It's like, this is the
and
fun part of exploration, you know?
in the same vein, my second Layla, before I actually talk about like the actual behind the scenes stuff,
Yeah.
is one of my favorite pairings of a visual and a sound, and it is the shot of not the Ranger, but the Endurance passing over Saturn, and
Yeah.
all you hear is you see the little speck of the Endurance. You see Saturn, and then all you're hearing is rain and thunder. And I was like,
Oh,
wow.
yeah.
And I'm like, I like who thought of this? I'm like, that's like he's always bringing it back to the emotion, always bringing it back to an emotional earth element or an emotional human element.
On the
Eh,
other hand, silence is also really well used in this movie, and when they go into the black hole and all you can hear is the things hitting off the side of the
Yeah,
ship, but there's no score or anything, it's just
yeah.
silence besides that. It's like it's so masterful. No one does this in The Dark Knight Rises and some of his other movies as well. He's so good at knowing when to employ a score and when to not,
Yeah.
and that's tough. A lot of directors don't know how to do that, even good ones.
And for this one, like the score itself, it goes back to the organ, because the first thing that
Yeah,
started with was no one was like, I don't want Hans writing something like, I say science fiction, and you're gonna get something like Justin Hurwitz with First Man using the theremin. It sounds good,
yeah.
but it is based within science fiction. I don't want this based within science fiction. I want this based within emotion. So he just gave him a couple lines like, this is the basis. I want you to write something about this. So Nolan gave Hans a prompt and was like, okay, go cook on this for like a day or two. They came back to it, and essentially day one, like the Interstellar theme is what he came up with, and that's the whole movie, isn't it?
I think that's a
And
good call out there. It's one of the reasons we love the Arrival score as well, actually, is because it's again not trying to do the science fiction-y type of soundtrack. It's like go write a soundtrack that is more about the emotion of what these guys are experiencing. So
and
I get
yeah,
exactly what you're saying there. Yeah.
and I was talking about Lisa Gerard for Gladiator, about how like her vocalization through that movie is the reason that score like sits with me so well even after all these years.
Yeah.
And Hans talks about the organ in the same way, in the sense that the organ is, yeah, you can just say it's a bunch of keys. It's not keys. There's so many little knobs you're pulling. There's the actual keyboard element of it. You're moving your feet, but the main thing is that the organ itself is a breathing organism, meaning that
Yeah.
the organ has to take a breath between certain parts. So the
Yeah.
entire movie, the one thing that comes to my mind is during No Time for Caution, where it's like dun dun, and then it's like there's you hear whatever a pause, and then he goes right back into it. And it's like it's almost a metronome, but it's a pace, but it's just there's a breath even within that. And I think one of the things crazy enough for that is that they met a guy called Roger Sayer, and he's the guy who played the organ. And they're sitting. It was like Lee Smith, the editor. It's Hans Zimmer. It's Christopher Nolan, and then all the sound folks. And they're in a church recording all this stuff. And they're sitting in a room with like a 12 by 12 little like 2000, like not even 2000. It looked like a 1999 TV. And they're sitting there, and they give him the pieces of music to play, and he'll just be like, oh, okay, I can do it like this is the note. He's like, no, I need something darker. Okay, how about this? Like, no, a little bit. Oh no, that's perfect. And they just kind of figured out how the organ is going to sound for all the scenes.
That's
And
awesome.
one of my favorite parts of this movie, one of my favorite memories of any movie of all time, is when Amelia Brandt, when she is going to save McConaughey, when she's going to save Cooper, there's a point when the organ is playing, and it was the only time in the movie where I zoomed out and I was like, wait, what is this score and what is this like, Iceland visual? Like it makes
Yeah.
like who cooked, and it very much is Nolan being like, no, we need to have an emotional basis for this. And it's the genius of Hans Zimmer, it's the genius of Roger Sayer, that all these elements come together, and then you get this great emotional effect because
Oh,
people are willing to take a risk.
not to
And
mention the wide shot of them 2 just fighting on the ice is just
oh yeah,
one of my favorite shots in a Nolan movie. The
yeah.
whole, and he talks about it a lot about the whole like, you're on this giant planet, light years away, and you still have this very human interaction of just 2 primates, evolved
just
primates just fighting each
just
other on the
just
ice,
crapping it out. Yep.
Yeah, just men trying to murder each other on this whole new galaxy, you know?
And the scale of that is crazy too, right? Where it's
Yeah,
like it's literally a helicopter. They had to bring out helicopters to get those shots, and they're just like, "Yeah, we're just gonna have these two fighting." And it's just like you feel the scale of like it feels like life or death. It is life or death
yeah,
for them, but you feel the tension and the emotion of it. Not everything has to be the end of the world, which the
yeah,
movie talks about, but it never feels like the end of the world the way comic book movies typically are like putting it out into the world now.
yeah,
And the last element is that use the intimate. This is a movie with massive scale but intimacy because of the score.
yeah,
And it could be literally there's a point where Hans is literally just having the bass players hitting their basses with a pencil. And that is, some of the metric, like some of the score is actually made from that, where it's just on the bass, and then he's using that into the score. And it's like Hans talks about, he's like, oh, like there's something great about us using woodwinds. We're using wood to make, a science fiction score. And I think that's the whole thesis for the movie is like you need to have that organic, intimate human element, but you also have to have that science element. And that's me as a human being. So
yeah.
Interstellar, one of the best scores ever made. I am probably going to listen to the score. I've listened to the score for 10 years now. It has never not made me emotional,
No,
no matter
it's
what.
they still pull it out sometimes, like the Oscars in between like segments.
Yeah.
They'll have like scores playing. Interstellar score is one they still play. I think a year or two ago, I remember like telling you that I was like, "Hey, they're playing the Interstellar score."
Oh, I got
Um,
heated. I
you
got
know,
heated. I was angry because it's like y'all didn't even give the Oscar to this movie and y'all still
we'll
using
get
it.
to that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
But
But
okay, off of the scores, I'm talking about the great cast for this movie because who should have been in Interstellar? Recast Interstellar.
oh, I didn't like doing this one, man. I
Oh,
didn't
I
like
I
doing this
came
one.
full. I didn't want to do it, but then when I got this, when I got into it,
So
I was like, let me cook this up.
this might be kind of like heresy, horrible, but it's hard to say, "Hey, let's take Michael
The
Caine out of a
heretic,
Nolan movie," you know? I might be a heretic for saying this,
blasphemy,
but, like,
shame.
but it's hard to say, "Let's take Michael Caine out of this movie," especially when he's good in his role in this movie,
Yeah.
but let's take him out, okay?
Okay.
Because at the end, it's cool how he subverts his stereotype with his heel turn, but I feel like it's almost a hair not believable, the heel turn he does at the end.
Yeah.
And I feel like you need someone who could do a little bit more of that calculative empathy.
Yeah.
So I think the person who could have pulled that off would have been Christopher Lee. He would have been old,
Oh,
but
yeah.
he's not much older than Michael Caine,
But
honestly.
he, but
I know
he,
he's since he
yeah, he
passed
had.
away a year or two after it
Oh, okay,
released.
okay.
So he was alive still at the time of filming. And I think he has that he always had something like behind his eyes where you like there's
Yeah.
something more going on with him where he can give you that kind of that affection, that grandfatherly
Yeah.
affection, but he also can do the heel turn. He can
But
play the
I'd
evil
argue,
character.
I'd argue Ian McKellen instead for that.
Well, that was somebody else I looked at,
I'd
and
look at no, because
I
like Christopher
yeah,
Lee, automatically as an audience, you always see him as a villain because Man from a Golden Gun, Dracula, he's classically always Count Dooku. Even for our era, he's always played villain roles, right? Saruman, he's playing a villain role. But if you cast, because that's the thing, half of casting is also
yeah,
what is the perspective of this individual in the zeitgeist, right? That if you
Yeah.
cast Ian McKellen and that he ends up being the villain, bro,
Well,
forget
it's
about it.
not it's less about the well, it's less about the playing against type and more about the ruthlessness. I think
Oh
they
yeah.
portray the Michael
But I'm talking about
Caine,
like just as
Dr.
like if
Brandt
I had to put the
character.
movie out, like
Yeah.
I would have to
No,
take that into
I'm
consideration.
saying the Dr. Brand character comes off as ruthless at the end in a way
Yeah.
because he's like, "I didn't figure it out and I didn't wanna tell anybody." And I feel you know,
Yeah.
basically, I know he has his reason, but that's basically it. And you're right, Ian McKellen would've been really good. I also think Christopher Lee would've been pretty interesting in that
Oh,
part. Just any
Christopher Lee's
older English actor, just
he
give
never
it
got his due.
put it in there. No, and it would've been cool to see him take on that side type of role where he's not like the main villain or anything, you know, where
Michael
he's just
Gambon could
this
have done it too.
Muigle Gambon, that's a good one,
Yeah.
actually.
RIP to
He
him
would have been
too.
very that would have been a good one too. So
Yeah.
any just take any older British actor, classical stage actor, and put it in. That's my recast. Any of them, all of them.
You have any more?
No, so I will
Okay.
say I do just wanna caveat not caveat, I do wanna add that, you know, when I first watched this a few times, I didn't love Anne Hathaway in it, and
Oh,
so before we watched it again this time, I was like, "I'm probably gonna recast Anne Hathaway," and then I watched it and I was like, "Oh, no, she did a great job."
she's
Like, she
amazing
killed
in
it.
the movie.
I'm good. Like, nope, not recasting her. She's good in this. Let's so that's why it was so hard for me to find someone. I was like,
It's the
you know,
love line.
yeah.
It's the
Can't
love
have a
line.
movie without Matthew McConaughey. You know, she's great in it. You know, I don't wanna recast, like, one of the kids, like, that's kinda not a fun recast, you know?
For my recasting, I went modern. Like I just
Okay.
don't I'm not
All of
even
them.
yeah, everybody.
Okay.
Because I went like one and then I was like, let me just do it.
I know, you
So
always do that. That's
off the
fine.
top,
That's fine.
Cooper. It's
Okay.
like I really can't imagine anybody else playing that role because Matthew McConaughey is that perfect in it. And I was like, oh, if I might even gender bend it. I might put like Emily Blunt in it, but or I did think about a couple other people. Person I ended up on was Josh Hartnett. He was in Trap this
Hmm,
year.
interesting.
He was in Oppenheimer. And
Yeah.
he's fantastic
Hmm.
in Oppenheimer. He's like, "What are you doing?" You know?
Well, let's talk about why this role works then. You need somebody who can credibly believe they have that level of empathy for their
Yeah.
kids. They also credibly believe they're scientists, but also they have oh,
So he's got the sauce. I think Nolan knows he's got the sauce, and he had already done a screen test with him for like Batman. And I'm never really like, oh, this is their logical thing or something. But I think Josh
yeah,
Hartnett did a fantastic job in Trap this year. I think he's also got heart, but he's also got like the realistic part to him. Like he shows that element in Oppenheimer pretty well. And if I had to go modern like this, like right now, I would put him in the movie.
okay.
And I thought of like Jake Gyllenhaal first, but I don't know if he's got the heart for it because he's the same. He's the age that that Matthew McConaughey was pretty much.
I wouldn't be able to believe he had that same level of love for his kids
No,
that
but
McConaughey was
Josh,
able to do.
I think
Yeah.
Josh, I would believe 100%.
Okay, who would you recast Anne Hathaway's character?
So both Dr. Brandt's because STEM
Yeah.
field over here. Dr. Brandt as Amelia, I would take out Anne Hathaway. I'm putting in Jamila Al Jamil from which you know her from The Good Place, right?
I really thought I was ready to jump on you. I thought you were gonna say Florence Pugh. I just felt
No,
like
no,
that's
no.
I
We
knew
already
your
did
brain was
that.
going there.
No, you know me.
But you recast her every time.
No,
Her
I
and,
don't. I mean, she was
your guy from Sing Sing. Those are the 2 you always
okay.
put in every
Coleman
movie, yeah.
Domingo did come up. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Coleman Domingo did come up
Again?
for
I
Doctor
got
Man.
people in my life
For Doctor
asking
Man.
me, "Why are you so much into Colvin Domingo?" I had someone in my life ask me that the other day. They were like, "Why does
He's a great
Vikas like this
actor.
guy so much?"
I don't
You
know.
know?
Okay, so she's the daughter, and Dr. Brandt, Michael Caine. I wanted she's South Asian, so I wanted the South Asian person for Dr. Brandt for Michael Caine's character, and I went with Nasruddin Shah. I'll show you who he is, but Nasruddin Shah is like he's one of these goated actors. He's so compelling, and he would have done the Dr. Brandt role perfectly. Believe
Yeah,
me, because he is really that fantastic. On to the other doctor. Dr. Mann was actually the interesting one for me because you know how I was talking
yeah.
about like the perspective of like what an audience believes, right?
Mhm.
You see Matt
That's a big
Damon
reason
come
that
out of
works.
his
Yeah,
grave, right? Lazarus, he comes
yeah.
out and you're automatically, yo, that's Matt
Like
Damon, man.
Jesus. That's Jesus right
You're
there,
you're
right? Coming
invested
back
with
from the
him, right?
dead.
You're not gonna think that he's the villain, right?
Yeah,
So first person that came up, I'm not casting him in it, but if someone was doing it today, it'd be Pedro Pascal. he's the one who comes out of there, and you would totally believe him to be
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
the charismatic guy, but then he ends up being the bad guy. And the one I actually cast, Hugh Jackman. Because imagine Hugh Jackman
Oh,
coming out
yeah.
of that crying, and then you would so believe,
Wait,
you'd be so
wait,
invested with it.
wait. Could Hugh Jackman have done the McConaughey role too, you think? Now that you think about it?
Okay, if he was younger, yes. Yes,
Yeah,
most definitely.
younger.
He could
Okay,
have
but
done
no,
it.
I like that what you're saying because he has that Hugh Jackman can do that thing of that inspirational thing that,
Yeah,
like, Matt Damon kinda does in the movie,
exactly.
right? If you see shoot, what was that one that I always love talking about? The, Bad Education, right?
Yes, yes.
That's half the movie what he's doing is he's trying to, he's either hiding or he's inspiring people, and that's kinda what Matt Damon's role is in this movie, is he's hiding stuff and he's inspiring people, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I love that cast. That's my favorite one you've done. That's
Because it's
great.
like, oh, like they talk about him, they blow him up. He's like, oh, like he's the one, he's the reason we really went all the way there, right? And
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman acting all grandiose and then
Oh,
ultimately
yeah.
being a wimp is that same
Yeah.
bad education, that same
Yeah.
string, and he could do it, and it would
He
be
can.
awesome. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, you
So
can all Hugh Jackman in any role, you pretty much got me, so I'm good.
no,
Yeah.
that's my favorite one. So Murph, I did do Murph. Young Murph would be Julia Butters, just off a default girl from Once
Wait,
Upon a Time in Hollywood. Lily James is playing Murph, the older one.
Lily
Y-
James, she's from
Driver, a bunch of
yeah,
stuff.
Baby Driver.
Yeah,
Yep,
she'd
yep,
be
I remember now.
fantastic. So the brother, I couldn't find another Timothy Chalamet. That's rare. It's rare to come up with. It doesn't really matter. But the older one, listen to this: Channing Tatum instead of Casey Affleck. Think about it. He could do it. It's not a crazy role,
Yeah.
but think about he has an energy to him where when he's serious, he's got it. Foxcatcher. He has a serious tone to him, and he would have been awesome as that role.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it, I like it. You know
He would have been so
hmm,
good. And I thought about him for Cooper, but I don't know if he's got the talent to pull off the emotional more bits because I know he can do some of it, but I don't know if he can do all of it.
yeah, I'm thinking about it right now.
Because
Yeah, I think
Channing's a
that's
good actor. We champion the dude
he
here.
is. But, I really actually watching this again too, I never really thought about the Casey Affleck part, it's kind of a nothing part, but he's
Yeah.
actually really good in it too.
Yeah,
Like,
he is.
there's he displays, like, a level of ignorance in the role, which is important, and I was trying to think, can Channing Tatum do that? And
He
I
could
I
do
think
it.
he can.
He
So,
could do
yeah,
it.
yeah. Also then I was thinking about that role if I was gonna recast it, and I was trying to think if, like, Guy Pearce could have pulled that off. I know we talked about him a little
He's a
earlier.
little older, but
He's
100%.
a little older now though, yeah, but
He
I
could
feel
have
like
pulled off
there's
Cooper.
oh, yeah, no, he
Actually, he could have done Cooper,
well,
actually.
you saw the story that came out the other day about
Yeah.
I guess
About the
when he
Warner
was
Brothers
with
executives
Warner
not wanting
Brothers
yeah.
didn't like Guy Pearce, and that hurt them collaborating again, which kinda sucks because
Yeah.
he was in, like, his first one that popped off, Memento, like, I wish that would've worked together again.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, what else is that all you're
Bro,
recasting, or is there
imagine
more?
imagine Guy Pearce as DA, as Two-Face instead of Aaron
Oh, yeah, that
Eckhart.
would've worked.
That would have been
Well, Aaron Eckhart was good, though,
he
but
was
yeah,
good,
no,
but if it was
but
Guy
you're right.
Pearce,
Guy Pearce would've been good.
it would have been so good.
Well,
Okay,
I'm
last
looking at
one.
all Nolan's movies right now, and I'm just, like, putting Guy Pearce in each one, like, in my head, and I need to stop. So, what's
Last
your other
one,
one?
Chris Cooper, one of my favorite character actors. He would play the grandfather, and he already has grandfather energy, and he would have
Chris
just been.
Cooper. What have
He's
I seen Chris Cooper in?
or I October Sky. He's
Oh,
in
yeah,
so
Chris
much
Cooper,
stuff.
American Beauty.
American
Got it.
Beauty, yes, yes, that's a big one. But it's like he's
Yep.
fantastic, and he's kind of got the old. He's already got the grandpa vibes, but he would have been just great in that little role.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about recasting.
John Lithgow
They
is
got a good actor for
fantastic.
that role too.
John
Such a small part
John
for him.
Lithgow, aka Lord
Just
Farquaad.
such a yeah, such a small part for John Lithgow to have. Like, that's
He's a goat,
pretty
man.
cool he did that,
One of the
yeah.
best of the best. But what I was talking about before was I wanted to recast. Okay, I'm throwing this. This is a listen to me. You might need to Google this. Recast a composer. Who would you put in this movie
Recast a
to
composer.
score this movie instead of Hans Zimmer? I'll tell you mine.
Okay, I gotta think,
I'll let
I
you
gotta
think.
think.
Mine would be Howard Shore, who did Lord of the Rings. And I think he's one of the few people that actually could have brought a real emotion to it because he understood the emotion of Lord of the Rings and it feels so good there. I think he's one of the few who could have really
You
brought something to
you
it.
want my real answer, and it's kind of a crappy answer?
Give me the real answer.
I mean, I kinda would like to see what John Williams would do with this score.
Bro, yes, yes, you bro,
Why
John
not,
Williams
you
doing
know?
this score, it would be so different. It obviously be his, like, classic work, but John Williams doing this score? Bro, forget about it. It would be so good. I don't think we've
I mean,
ever
like, what
I never thought about putting John Williams in another movie, you
well,
know? That's not even coming to mind.
this is the type of movie that Spielberg would have been interested in making, you know?
He was interested in making it.
This is a Spielberg movie, you know, like,
He Spielberg
kids, all that
he
stuff.
he I think early two or not early 2000s, late 2000s, he was trying to make this movie, and there was an element of aliens in there before, which I'm glad they took out the aliens because it's not the point of this movie. And the movie Nolan made is the better movie, but Spielberg was literally in the pot to make the movie, so makes
No,
sense.
it makes sense when you look at the script. He would have done it a lot different, but it definitely reads like a Spielberg script. Like the first draft of this reads like like there's a different draft. He would have done multiple drafts, or whoever his writer was, and would have got to a different part. But this would have been definitely the first draft of something he read and been like, yeah, that's I can see myself doing that.
No, no, literally, like he was supposed
Yeah,
he they were in deep conversation to make this movie. But as with Spielberg, you know, he'll just move from one project to another project and he'll have like five movies he might direct, he might not direct.
yeah.
So
No, I get
yeah.
that. And then he somehow does Ready Player One,
Okay.
and it's like, dude,
Okay.
you didn't turn that
Soapbox.
one down.
Soapbox.
That's my soapbox.
Get
No, I'm
on your
kidding.
soapbox. Tell me
So
if you got
okay,
a hot not a hot take, but any take about this movie, man.
well,
Interstellar.
I like to just use this as like a free space category, you
Yeah.
know, like free parking, you know? So, like, I want to just talk a little bit about the original teaser trailer of this film.
Yeah.
So, I could be wrong. I think it played over Man of Steel. And if that's the case,
Yeah.
then I
Yeah. Yeah.
saw it with my dad in IMAX on Father's Day is when I saw the teaser for this. And the teaser for this was a big deal because I remember you'd hear whispers around it from your friends on the internet, like, "Hey, did you heard that there's an Interstellar, Nolan's next movie? The teaser is out, like, gonna be played in front of Man of Steel." It's like, "What?" And then, you know, there's a lot of hype for Man of Steel at the time too. It's like, "What? I get to" so I had to see this in IMAX just so I can see the trailer in IMAX. I don't even care about Man of Steel anymore. I wanna see the teaser for this.
What movie
And then you see it.
we saw Hobbs and Shaw in IMAX. What movie was coming out? Was it
Was
Dunkirk?
that another one that we wanted to see the trailer
Yeah,
for?
we wanted to see the trailer for I think Dunkirk,
Oh, wait,
and
I wanna see Hobbs& and Shaw. What year was that? 2019.
because
No, that would've been too early for Dunkirk.
I dragged you and Jacob to go see it in IMAX, and they didn't even show the trailer.
Oh, it was Tenet. It was the
It
Tenet
was
one.
Tenet, man,
Yeah, I just searched it up. Tenet was the one that was ahead of Hobbs& and Shaw.
man. They it would have been a great trailer to see, but they didn't show it. So
No,
what a
so
bummer.
but back to what I was trying to say. So, this is one of my favorite trailers of all time, this teaser. And if you haven't seen it before, pause this podcast, go look it up, make sure it's the teaser you're seeing, not the first trailer. First trailer is great too. But go watch it if you don't remember it because it's mostly just historical footage, like a lot of historical footage of, you know, us in the space race and all that stuff, like from the 60s and before. But it's a masterclass in showing you almost nothing about the movie, but also giving you everything you need to know about the tone of the movie. Like there's like I think two shots in the
3.
whole trailer, and it's basically like, or maybe one, and it's
It's
just
3.
like him
It's 2
driving
shots.
away.
It's like 2 shots of corn, and then there's a shot
Yeah,
of, like, maybe
the
him
him
driving
driving.
away, and then them, like, whatever, holding hands, and the camera panning
Yeah,
up as, like,
yep,
the spaceship
that's
takes
right.
off.
I just watched it like a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
So that itself is like it's hard to do that and also get someone invested because if I just saw some random trailer like that from another director, I don't know if I would have been into it. But the way that Nolan crafted that trailer is unforgettable. It's one of
McConaughey's
my favorite
narration.
trailers ever. Yeah, his narration's great, but they also didn't they have was it just McConaughey who was narrating
I
that?
think Kennedy's in there a little bit too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's a great McConaughey's a great narrator anyways. So, but yeah, that's my soapbox. I want to talk to you a little bit about the teaser itself because I think that out of all of Nolan's trailers and everything, that's the
It's one
one
of the
that is
best
like
ever.
and it lives on.
One of the
Like
best
you
trailers,
talk to
period.
anybody,
Yeah.
you can talk to anybody you're on the street like who's a fan of film and be like, "Hey, you remember that Interstellar teaser?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, I do. It was amazing."
And one of the things about that also is that it's got it came out at a time where just as a culture where there's a real reaction of like we're not going to space anymore, and that was kind of the current culture. Like the space shuttle missions fully stopped. There's
Mhm.
never going to be a space shuttle mission ever again, and that's I think it's we're still in that space right now technically, and that sort of vision of the Earth and the way that the trailer like really pumps up the hope, and it's like oh we as humans, and this goes right into my soapbox that humanity has never taken it on the chin in the sense that like we will never we shouldn't be giving up on each other, and we will always strive for better, and striving for better, striving for greatness, striving for uncovering the unknown has been a core of modern humanity,
What
and
do you mean taking it on the chin?
meaning that we're not going to give up, bro, chill. But like
No, I no,
I'm
I just don't know what I
no
didn't know
no I
what you
mean like
I
we're never like when we're down for the count we're not going to give up, and
but
this whole
okay.
movie is about that, right? That
Well, you're
no
talking about the
matter
resilience of the human spirit is
yes,
what you're talking about. Okay.
exactly. And this like Cooper shows it time and time again through this movie that despite the odds, despite what's going on, that he is gonna prevail because he wants to get back to his kids.
Yeah.
And the other half of that is Dr. Men, where he's like, okay, we can sacrifice humanity. You know, the needs of a few don't outweigh the feuds of everyone. And
Yeah.
that's a Star Trek theme, but it's also much colder the way that Dr. Man poses it because it's the end of humanity, and the whole, the whole element of leaving Earth like I told you, I like this movie. I love this movie, but I don't agree with the philosophy that even Kip Thorne was talking about it where he's like, "Oh, we need to start worrying about getting off of Earth." And I really don't like it's not going to happen in our lifetime. I don't think we need to worry about it, but in the sense that I don't think the next generations they don't need to they don't you should shoot for the stars, but we don't need to live in them because what we have here we will never get again. And we live in a time where people aren't, getting along in any way, shape, or form. And it's like that's all we have to do that. So that's my soapbox that I think we should all be curious human beings, but we're not meant to leave this earth in a sense of like a mass migration. I don't believe that. So, which is crazy for me to say because I've really loved this movie, but I don't agree with that one
I
bit.
don't think this movie is even saying that I
No,
don't
no.
think even
So in
that's the
the like
thesis of this
the
movie at
extras,
all.
they are not, but like the extras for the movie, one of the last pieces that they have in there is like them talking about that, and like I was like, and Kip Thorne really outright says that we need to start thinking about this, and that's a very scientist thing to do. It's a very cold thing to do.
Yeah.
That's his opinion. I'm fine with it, but it's not mine. That's all. And I think Nolan ascribes to ours, right? That he is worried about humanity. All science fiction is all about going to this other galaxy, doing all this stuff, but it's the human element that we all need to figure this out because we don't want to be like that
Well,
that sort of like space is not far from us. And
it's the
Nolan
idea
sets
of
it in that sort of
do you
place.
need to compromise also, the lives of your loved ones and the innocent for the greater good. He does this in Dark Knight with the fairy
Yep.
problem, right?
Yep.
And Nolan's response time and time again seems to be, "Well, you don't need to compromise these
You
things
need to have faith
just
in
because,
humanity. Or
you
but
need to have
see, it's
faith
a
in
faith
you need to have
that we're all
faith."
responsible.
Yeah,
That if we act as human beings, that we will make the right decision, which is that my life is not more valuable than someone else's. And the
yeah,
whole thesis of Batman, or at least the Dark Knight, is that he is not going to kill somebody. He is not going to choose somebody over somebody else. And he uses in the Joker in his chaos is trying to show that, oh, everybody is not as good as you say. You are not right.
yeah,
You're going to be wrong. I want to break you down in every single way possible. And we get
yeah,
both outcomes, right? We get the outcome of Harvey and we get the outcome of the fairy. But I believe in the fairy more than Harvey because
yeah,
it's the actions of all these people versus the action of few. And
yep,
we'll talk about it next year.
yeah, for sure. Okay, let's see.
Let's get to the Oscars.
Yeah, let's do it.
2014 Oscars for the 2015
2015.
Oscars for the 2014 movies. We've already talked about these. You should go and listen to our, we already redid the Oscars for this year. You should go listen to them. We always have a great time doing that. It's a pod from 2024, early 2024. But this is a very specific thing for me because I love this movie. We just talked about Dawn for the Planet of the Apes, not really arguing anything there, but talk about the Oscars this year because it is an interesting year that has not aged well.
Yeah,
to
let
some
me
extent.
read off its Oscars for this year, and then we can kinda go through a few of them.
Okay.
So, Interstellar was nominated for production design, sound editing, sound mixing, score, and the only one it won was visual effects.
So Paul
So,
Franklin
no
finally got his Oscar. That's all it was.
yeah, all below the line stuff, none of it was acting or cinema. I mean, I guess cinematography is below the line, but there's not even a cinematography nom. There's a few I want to go through. So the first one I want to talk to is the score
Yeah.
section for this year because that is honestly it is an insane group of composers.
It
So
it's
in
it's Desplat, Alexander Desplat. He's in it
yeah,
twice. What is it? Imitation Game. I'm not even reading anything. Imitation Game
okay,
and
yep.
Grand Budapest Hotel and Grand Budapest Hotel 1.
Yeah,
And
so Desplat was in there for both of
to this
those.
day, I
Zimmer,
don't
but
wanna hear it.
um, Johann was in there for the Theory of Everything, which
Johan
not a big fan
Johansson.
of Theory. Ohan, yeah,
Yeah.
but not a big fan of Theory of Everything, but still a great score. And then Gary Yershon from Mr. Turner, no idea what that is.
That's what's his name?
The most of them are good.
I mean, Mike Lee. That's Mike Lee's movie. Turner's the one with the dude Timothy Spall from what do you call it? He's the rat dude from Harry Potter.
Yeah, okay. So I love the Grand Budapest Hotel score. However, it feels like the reason Interstellar did not win this is because there was Hans Zimmer fatigue. I'm pretty sure he won for Inception. If he didn't,
I
that's
think
insane.
it's
But
the other thing. It's
I think there's some
the
fatigue from him at this point, and it's part of the reason he lost. Plus, Desplat's score in Grand
Desplat
Budapest is really
is a
good.
Desplat hype. He's got 2
Yeah,
movies nominated. That's a hype.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's 2 things working, and it's like 10 years later, bro, like, there's no argument about it. It's Interstellar.
No, but it's still a good score. But yeah, it's Interstellar's
No
the one that's
discount to
lived on.
Desplat, but,
Let me let me
facts
tell
are
you what
facts
Best
for
Picture
me.
looks like this year. Since it didn't get nominated for Best Picture, let me tell you what it looks like because it's actually
Crazy.
a good year. It's a
It's a
good
great
year.
year, and this is the year I'm talking about it again, the Key and Peele sketch. How is Ava DuVernay not nominated, but the movie is nominated for Best Picture?
So the nominees for Best Picture this year were Boyhood,
Good movie.
American Sniper, Grand Budapest, Imitation Game, Selma, Theory of Everything, and then our favorite of the nominees, Whiplash. And then the winner was Birdman this year, which I have watched Birdman so many times and I still am not sure how much I like it. It's kind of weird. I've never watched another movie like that ever where I've watched it a ton of times and I just
I
still
have
am not
no
sure what my
I
thoughts
have
are.
no specific emotions to this, but I'm
Yeah.
kinda
It's
like
like it's good, but it's good, but that's it. Like I
the
don't
problem
know.
is
It's
the pretension
weird.
of it. There's a pretentiousness that comes off that kinda gets you out of there, that's the problem. It's a good
'Cause
movie.
I've seen that like 5
I
times,
like
and
it,
there's movies I like a lot more I've never seen 5 times.
but
It's
I
kinda
like
crazy.
Chef more than that, honestly, for
Yeah, and that there
movies,
was the
come on.
yeah. So, okay, it didn't get any of those nominees. I mean, most of these you coulda knocked like, I think Boyhood definitely deserves to be here. Birdman, you can say,
Whiplash,
sure.
yeah.
But I'm just Whiplash, I
Grand
have to
Budapest wasn't nominated for
and
Best
Grand
Picture?
Budapest no, it
Oh, okay,
was.
I was about to
Yeah.
say, that's a good
This
movie.
was this was Wes Anderson's most successful
It's his best movie
film
besides Isle of
commercially. Yeah.
Dogs.
But, I mean, you coulda Imitation Game and Theory of Everything both could have been swapped out for Interstellar. Same
That's
thing with
just
Selma.
that Interstellar or okay, Selma's the only one that warrants its place. Theory of Everything,
Also,
I'm not worried about.
I wanna talk about this for a second. Boyhood.
Yeah.
When are we gonna get the cultural, like, reexamination of that? Because that kinda came and went, and I feel like there's something there. I
No
remember
one's
watching that.
no one's talking about it because people
There's
they don't talk
something there.
about Richard Linklater enough. That's the problem, right?
They don't.
A bunch
They
of,
don't.
like, nerdy people will talk about it, like, I how much have I been bugging you to watch, Hitman this year, right?
Oh, it's true. Good point. I haven't watched it, you know?
But, like,
Um,
if I'm bugging you to watch it, it's a good movie, but it's like people aren't, thinking like Linklater as a film community, we all think highly of him, but generally in the zeitgeist, he doesn't come up too much, even though he has a great catalog of movies. So,
for sure. He's kinda like that indie band that got famous but never, like, mainstream.
yeah,
That's kinda how his thing
but
is. Like,
that's how
he had
he's
he
like the
that's
coolest
yeah.
dude.
Yeah, and it fits his how he feels. Okay, so a couple other things here. Best actor, again, no nomination. Let me tell you what actors were nominated so you can
Okay,
get mad about it.
so okay, go ahead.
Do you wanna guess or do you want me to
No,
just
no, no.
tell you?
Tell me, I've forgotten from
Okay.
yesterday.
So the nominees for this year, actor in a leading role, Michael Keaton. Fine, keep him there.
Good.
He was actually really good in that. Benedict Cumberbatch and Imitation Game.
Good,
Ew, that
good,
was, like, one of the last I
but
mean, fine.
but
That was a
no.
Harvey Weinstein hack job,
I
though,
say
all
yes,
those
but I say
nominations.
no to it. Yeah.
Bradley Cooper, American Sniper.
Good, but no.
Steve Carell, Foxcatcher.
Yes, and yes.
Okay,
And
but here's
I will add Andy Serkis for
sure,
for
he's not on here,
is
but I know
Andy
what you're saying.
Serkis, you have,
But
Cooper, Matthew
w
McConaughey. I mean, what
yeah,
else do you need?
what I'm saying but
Keaton.
the winner, this is where it's dogged, okay?
Ah!
Eddie Redmayne won for A Theory of Everything.
Guys, if you're
That's
listening,
probably the worst out of all these nominated.
if you ever heard of campaigning for the Oscars, that's what it looks like.
Yeah,
That's what it looks like. You know, when someone wins an Oscar for acting for a movie that's subpar at best, there you go.
okay. Last one I wanna go over, another area they were not nominated in, cinematography, because we just talked about this. This is Hoyte doing some of his best work of
Who
his
won?
career still. Okay, well, let me go through it. So, Unbroken, Roger Deakins got a nom. That's fine. Give Roger Deakins a nom every time he turns the camera on. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Dick Pope for Mr. Turner.
He
Again,
just
no idea
passed
what that
away.
is.
He just passed away. He's
Yeah.
actually, like, a
Um,
really good cinematographer, RIP.
apologies. I'm not going to try to pronounce this name, but Ida.
Ida
I,
from Paweł Pogorzelski,
no.
Polish movie, black and white.
Yeah.
I was
It's not. You got the guy's name wrong, but I'm not going to
No, no,
try
no,
to pronounce
Paweł is
it
the
either.
director. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the director.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Robert Yeoman for Grand Budapest got a nom. I'm fine with
Best
that. And then
career
we
best
argued
work.
about this a lot at the time, or maybe we were in agreement. I don't remember. But Birdman won Best Cinematography, and I get that it was the gimmick of the non-cutting,
Yeah.
between scenes. But I always felt like the cinematography that for that movie was actually kind of bland, and
So,
that it. I feel
Chivo
like
had a
it
hype.
actually suffers from the gimmick a bit, like in
Eh,
terms of the look of the movie.
Gravity, Birdman, and The Revenant. He won 3 years in a row, and I'd argue he didn't deserve 2 of them, you know?
Yeah.
I love
So the
him.
one he deserves,
I
you think, is
literally in this
Gravity, right?
podcast, I literally said he's one of the best cinematographers we have. But
Yeah.
even then, I no, it's Hoyte. It's Hoyte, no doubt.
And I feel like it was such just a gimmicky win just because when you look at that movie, it's really not a good looking movie. It's just I
I like
mean,
the
it's
look of the
fine,
movie.
but
I
it
like the look of the movie. I ain't gonna lie. I like how Birdman
I
looks,
don't.
but it's
I
not
feel like
great. It's good, but not great.
I feel like you could have almost done more without that gimmick in that movie, which is probably controversial, but I really feel like it actually held the movie back in terms of its visual style, you know?
Yeah. Because it is a sandbox. Like you're putting definite lines, whatever, definite, what do you call it? Little, okay, put it this
Yeah,
way Birdman versus 1917. 1917 looks vastly better because Roger
it
Deakins
does.
does it right.
And that's the condemnation of this movie, right? That 1917 did it like 10 years later or whatever, 8 years later, and it looks far superior and it's doing the same thing. So why are we giving Birdman this credit for continuous shots when it doesn't look that good compared to a movie that at least actually Deakins made it look good and incorporated this gimmick of never cutting,
Yeah.
into what they were doing. So that's my biggest when I was looking through all these trying to figure out okay, Interstellar we know got shanked, it didn't get everything it needed, it got robbed. But
Oh,
this was one I
oh,
was
no,
like,
hold on, hold
"Really?
on, hold on, hold on. Okay.
What? Which one?"
Okay. Let's start off the top. Directing. No nom for Nolan. Come on, get out of
Yeah,
here.
he always got left out on that. And
Costumes. No, no, like I'd argue for it. I think the costuming in this movie is
let's
fantastic,
see.
and every time
Grand Budapest one
you have
costume,
a
yeah.
contemporary movie that has like contemporary
Oh,
set that has good costume work, they don't give it credit because it
this
all
was the Into the Woods year and the
yeah,
Maleficent year.
yeah, yep.
Okay.
Production design lost to Grand Budapest Hotel, Adam Stockhausen,
Yep.
fantastic,
It did
production
get
design.
nom for that.
It did get
Yeah.
nominated. So like, it sucks, but like I'm not arguing it. Editing. How do you not have a nomination for editing for Lee Smith? Tell me
Let
that.
me look. You're right. Hey, Whiplash won editing. They got one
Which
thing
Tom
right, though.
Cross 100%
Yeah. Dude's
deserves an
insane, man.
Oscar. He's one of my favorite editors, period.
Dude is insane.
But
Yeah.
I think even Tom Cross would agree.
No,
But
no, you're right.
I'd
It
argue
deserves some
Whiplash,
editing.
honestly, right now,
Yeah,
even
but yeah, Whiplash still gets that one. That's fine.
because like the editing in Whiplash it feels like this, if you have the energy of that movie. And Nolan can work with anybody to make it work. But Tom
Hey,
Cross brought life to Whiplash.
can you guess what the visual effects noms were for this year?
Guardians of the Galaxy,
Yep, that's
Winter
one.
Soldier's probably in there
Yep, that's
unwrongfully.
two.
Uh Obviously, this
Yep, that's
is
3.
Dawn for the
This
Planet of
one
the Apes
won.
in there?
Yep,
Yeah,
that's 4. You need one more.
2014. It's probably a bad movie. What is it? Big
Well,
Hero
it's
6 is
okay.
coming out in my head, which is not, it's a
It's,
animated movie.
X-Men: Days of Future
Oh, it's
Past.
just good. It's a good movie. Okay, never
So
mind.
this is a pretty solid lineup for
Everything
visual
besides,
effects,
I mean, like
right?
Winter Soldier has passable CGI. It's good. It
For
works for the
Yeah.
movie, but if you look back at it today, which I did rewatch the movie this year, it fades a little bit. But it's
No,
better
so,
than
I
most.
mean,
Well, oh my gosh! If you
I
compare
kinda
it to
feel
Captain
bad for
America
Dawn
4,
here.
it is
Yeah.
egregious.
I feel bad for Dawn here. I think most years Dawn would have
Dawn should
actually
have
won
won.
this.
Dawn,
Yeah.
yes. Because
I
okay, no, no, it
mean,
shouldn't have
we
won this year.
might be
It
dropping
should,
reels in a pod about that, like, well, I guess by the time you hear this, we've already done it,
yeah.
so
But of Dawn for the Planet of the Apes, the VFX is great. I would argue it
yeah.
more the Blade Runner year than this year, honestly.
Yeah.
But
Okay, wait, I always get the names of it mixed up. So, is Dawn the second one?
Dawn is the second one. War for the Planet of the
Okay.
Apes 2017. That's the one the year
So
Blade Runner
the
came out.
yeah, the Blade Runner year one, that should
That's
that's one
another
I still haven't
argument.
seen.
That's another
Yeah,
argument we have with cinematography. Deakins
yeah.
on Blade Runner versus Hoyto with Dunkirk. I still am arguing Blade Runner for
And
Deakins,
I'm still on Dunkirk, like, that's you know, and it's 2 completely different things too,
right?
but yeah, that's a good argument that we have, like, for I mean,
We've had
it's
the
good.
argument for how many years?
It's a good argument. Yeah,
7
none of
years.
us are wrong either there, yeah. Just wait till we do the 10-year, Oscars on The Pursuit.
Okay, but this movie, Interstellar, this movie has such a brazen legacy, I think. And I've always talked about this movie. I keep talking about it. I remember being in an organic chemistry class. And I'm like, hey, it's a most of my classes were like my science class were always a lot of women, always a big proponent for that, with STEM field. But I was like, y'all, I bawled my eyes out during this movie. It's called Interstellar. Y'all need to watch it. They're like, you cried during a movie? I'm like, yes, I cried during a movie. Watch this movie. And then they come back and they cried too. And they're like, okay, I understand. And every time I talk about this movie, it ages even better, even better, even better. Talk about the legacy for this movie, what's going on. I think maybe Matt Damon has the worst legacy out of everybody in this movie.
Okay, so the
Has
first
Matt
thing is you
Damon made a
can't
better movie than this since then? You tell me.
okay, wait,
The
wait, no,
Martian
I'm
is
gonna
up
stop
there.
whatever I'm gonna talk about, and I'm looking this up because I think that's a good question. You might be right. This is better than The Martian. I'm bringing up his IMDb, we're just running through it.
And I love The
Okay,
Martian.
well, that's almost not fair though, because like this is a fantastic movie. I would say Ford versus Ferrari is pretty good.
Oh,
Obviously,
okay.
it's
Never
not
mind.
this,
I'm being okay. Yes, that's up there. That's up there.
Don't be too disrespectful to him,
Oppenheimer
okay?
is up there
Like
too, isn't it?
Oppenheimer, yeah, he's in that. Technically, he's in the third Thor movie or the
Oh yeah, he's in Thor
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
Yeah,
He's in
that's a
he's
good
in the
one.
Lego movie too, right?
Is he?
He's playing like Green Lantern or something, right? Like Superman or something.
You're right though. He had a lot of bad movies
I love Matt, but
since
see, I
Interstellar.
love Matt Damon. Matt Damon is one of my favorite actors, and like this is a Matt Damon household, And I just, I hope he does better work. I'm like the Instigators was not it, Like, come
The
on,
Great Wall. You remember the Great Wall?
yeah,
Okay, so let me go back to what I was going to say now. Then,
okay,
so the one thing is that you cannot talk about this movie's legacy without first mentioning the reconnaissance.
yeah,
Reconnaissance.
yeah,
The Matthew McConaughey Renaissance. So this was around the time where he just showed up in True Detective again, right before this.
yeah,
Biggest, I mean, I think we can say that was one of the biggest TV shows that first season of all time. Like
100%.
people you don't even talk to about TV were watching it. It was a huge deal. And then he showed up in Wolf of Wall Street and stole the show for like that 10 with the like there's a whole
Very
story
nice.
behind all that that
Yeah,
you probably know, and if you don't you can figure it out, but he was very influential in that movie as well. And so this was like the cherry on top. He has those two parts. He has a great TV role and then a side part that he steals from a Martin Scorsese movie from Leo, and then this is the height of it. I think he wins an Oscar for another movie the next year or
Dallas
something. It's
Buyers Club was the year before.
kind of forgettable movie, good role, but forgettable
Yeah,
movie.
yeah,
I saw it, but Interstellar is kind of the height of the reconnaissance here, where it's like he's leading now $100 million or $160 million big budget Christopher Nolan space movie, and then knocks it out of the park. And like at that time, you were like, "Oh,
He's back
okay,
on
Matthew
top.
McConaughey is like the biggest actor in the world right now." It's
Yeah.
like him, and it's Leo, and it's like Matt Damon, and that's it, you know. And I know since then, it's his career probably just kind of tapered off again, but
And I
it
think
was
he's
cool.
choosing just not to work now.
Yeah,
That's what it is, which
no, and
sucks.
he doesn't need to
And,
either.
like, The
But
Gentleman was good. Like, that's, I think, the last good movie I saw him in. And I
But he also
we
showed that
love
he
him.
could do it.
We
He
love him.
showed that he could do this stuff if he wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
But all I'm trying to say is it's almost hard to separate this movie from that because that was such a big deal at the time, his comeback,
Yeah, yeah,
and this movie cemented him as,
yeah.
like, one of our great actors, when
Uh,
he was kind of a joke, you
Pat
know, and then he does those couple parts and then this, and
Pat
he's
was
not a
like
joke anymore.
Pat was like, "Oh, did y'all forget that he was a good actor? Like, he started as a serious actor, and then they started paying him 10, $20 million for to play these rom-com roles, so he did it." Pat gets really
Yeah,
heated about that.
and now he just shows up
Listen
at
to this, Pat.
University of
I'm
Texas
sorry.
games and
I mean this sincerely.
yeah, now he's just the University of Texas, like, my
Yeah,
mascot.
mascot.
He's always at the games, running around, he goes on the shows, he gives locker room speech, it's really funny, I love it. I love that he's, like, half of his, like, ti time now professionally seems just dedicated to the Longhorns football team.
Yeah. No, it really
It's
is.
it's like Spike Lee if Spike Lee started
Yeah,
showing up,
to
you know,
the
he shows up at the Knicks games, but what if he
no,
just
no, no.
started going to the locker room every game and giving media interviews and, you know, stuff like that? That's basically what it'd be like. It's kinda it's really funny, honestly, especially because it's a college program. It's not
Yeah.
even like a pro program. Yeah.
So, Matt, we talked about Anne. I do want to say Anne Hathaway. I think the legacy for her has been great. I think she has always been a star. She's grown into a more mature sense, and she's owning her career in a great way. And we love Anne Hathaway here, and I don't think she gets her credit sometimes. So I'm excited
It's
to see her
weird
new movie. I'm going to
because
show you a photo from our new movie. You're gonna be like, oh, it's gonna be awesome.
it's weird because if you asked anybody about Anne Hathaway roles, it would probably take like 10 movies before they got to a role on Interstellar.
Yeah,
Like it's
my first
the
one is
role
Princess
itself is
Diaries, though.
well, the role itself is not
Yeah,
forgettable, but that role in the context of her career is forgettable. It's a movie you can easily forget that she did because
yeah.
she didn't get any awards. It was like a good performance, but didn't like steal the show or anything. But that's the thing is that she can show up in these side parts when she wants to and actually knock it out of the park.
This is one
And
of the
she's gotten
yeah.
better and better every
This
year.
is one of the few movies where the protagonist actually takes hold. There's a lot of movies where like the supporting actor takes hold, and then you always remember that. But I
Yeah.
was talking about Gladiator. That's one of them. But you have Commodus in there, like whatever Joaquin Phoenix. But talk about The Dark Knight, right? That you have Christian Bale being great, but it's very much the Joker that everyone keeps talking about, right? But it's
Yeah.
not a discount to the person playing the main role. So it's always
Another
interesting.
one, actually, in terms of legacies, not even an actor. I think we talked a little bit about it, but Hoyte, his
Oh,
legacy from
bro.
this on.
Talk
You know,
his
this
he no, run up his list. Nope.
let me do that. And let
Bro,
me
it
just
is a
tell you,
fantastic list.
Hoyte went from next big thing to one of our great cinematographers in the span of like a few years. And this was probably the one that finally crowned him as like, okay, he's one of the best. Let me just run you through what he's done. Let me see what's a good year to start with.
Start with
Let's start
her.
with 2010,
Okay.
The Fighter,
Okay.
because
We
people
don't talk
forget The
about that
Fighter.
that director. We hate him. But
That's fine, but we're
we don't
starting
say that a lot, but
2010.
y'all know
Now,
who I'm talking about.
I'll skip a couple that aren't big, but most of these are pretty big. So you got The Fighter, then you got Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy,
Fantastic.
then you got Her,
Yep.
Interstellar, Spectre, which you can talk about that movie not being
Well
great, but
shot.
the movie looks great.
Yeah.
Dunkirk,
Yep.
okay, bunch of Capital One ads. Ad Astra,
Yep.
which
Oh yeah.
that might come up a little later, but it was also an amazing looking movie.
Oh yeah.
Tenet,
Yep.
Nope,
Fantastic
and then
visually.
Oppenheimer. Like, and I'm not skipping movies, like, I'm skipping basically,
Just ads.
commercials.
Yeah.
Like, these are, like I'm actually talking about all of the movies that he's done. Like, he is
On
even
top.
these movies that aren't great, it's
He
not his fault. Like, it looks great, you know?
and
Ad Astra looks
there's a
incredible.
Nolan effect too, because when he went to go work on Nope, he essentially got to Jordan Peele was like, "You got to shoot this on IMAX. You got to do IMAX. You got to do
Yeah.
IMAX." So
I give
Peele was like, "Okay,
Jordan
let's do
Peele
IMAX."
I give Jordan Peele a lot of credit for just bringing in Hoyte for that, like, being like, "Let me go get Nolan's guy real quick." Like,
It no,
he knew
it
what
was
exactly
kind of
what he was doing
a
there.
I think it was something where like someone had dropped out or something, and they were just like, "Oh, would he ever do this?" And he did, and it just kind of worked out for them.
But isn't it kinda weird that he doesn't do many movies outside of Nolan, though?
But
Like,
it's a
he did,
time to.
James Gray, Ad Astra, Jordan Peele, Nope, but besides that,
He's
the
sitting there
last,
waiting
like
for Nolan, and they're
the
probably
last
working
almost
together
10
right
years has
now in
pretty
prep.
much been Nolan.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, why is no one else, unless he only wants to work with Nolan, why is no one else
I
grabbing
think
him?
it's a
Like,
time thing too,
maybe.
because
It
it's
could
like
be.
Nolan's productions are so intensive, and then he just takes time off, and he's got
I
the.
mean,
I think he's in a place where he can take breaks now.
and but he's getting better too. Like, I
Oh yeah,
mean, compare even Oppenheimer, we love how
bro.
Interstellar
I
looks, but
swear,
compare it to
right now,
Oppenheimer.
literally in
Yeah,
this moment, Hoyda is working at this moment on the new Nolan movie. Probably they're probably figuring out
probably.
some crazy rig to make for an IMAX camera or something like that. They're just innovating the technology yet again.
Well, he hasn't done a movie since Oppenheimer last year,
So he's
so
busy
I could see it. That I could see that he might be busy on that. Yeah,
because they're shooting first quarter of next year. That's what Nolan said. So yeah, they'll be back at it. I will say, arguably, the person with the greatest legacy in this movie. Who is it besides Nolan and Hoyda? It's
I
Timothy.
thought it was McConaughey. Oh, Timothy. Well, no, it's not. I mean, you mean like since this movie?
Since
Yeah,
this movie, this like
because it's a nothing part that he's
if
in
you
for this
yeah,
movie.
if you
Yeah,
invested with him, at this point, he is skyrocket top of the game right now. Bob Dylan movie coming out, within, 2 days, good for
it
him.
does show a
I'm
good.
happy
It
for him.
shows an eye for talent there, right? Casting him, before he's anybody in this role. You see that happen sometimes
Yeah.
too, where you'll see like a young actor with a good director, and it's like before they're really a good actor though, and you're just like,
It's
oh, like they saw something in
yeah.
this person, and they knew they wanted to help give them a shot, give them a break, even though they're still really young, and that's cool that Timothy's in this. I don't have a lot to say about Timothy in this. Not much
No,
going
it's
on, but
not
he's
there's no sauce
clearly
to give him there, like,
one of our
besides
most famous actors alive right now, like famous young actors, under 30 or whatever,
yeah, he's our age.
Yeah.
Or he's our age or, like, Bart's like, he's a year older than us, so
I'm actually looking that up. I wonder how old he is.
he's a 95 or a
Yeah,
9.
1995.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's one of us.
late 95.
Yeah.
His birthday's actually on the 27th
So
this
we
month.
so we
There you
would
go.
have been in school together. That's what that means.
No, I mean, honestly, like, yeah, you're right. He's had the biggest growth from this movie because he was basically nobody when this movie came out, and now he's like one of the biggest stars. He just led Dune, multi-million dollar blockbuster. He's in a Bob Dylan biopic that apparently is getting Oscar buzz. Like,
Marty
yeah, he's a
Supreme is
dude, man.
coming. Oh, Ed
He is
Norton.
a
Ed
dude.
Norton, of all people, he's pretty full of himself at times, but Ed Norton was like, he's one of the few
Okay,
performances I've seen where I'm like,
here,
dang.
hear me out. Hear me out. I know we're past the recasting. Okay,
Yes,
but
it would work. As
Ed
Michael
Norton
Mann, or I mean,
is Michael
Dr. Mann.
Mann, Doctor
As
Mann.
Dr.
Yeah,
Mann.
yeah, where he gets out of the pod, he's like, I am the one who's going to save humanity." Like, you wouldn't believe him for a second. You
Yeah.
wouldn't believe
But
him,
it's
but it
like,
would be
he would be
so
so
funny.
good at it, though.
It would be like his Birdman part where he's just like an annoying,
I love him in that movie.
jackhole. Yeah,
He's hilarious in that.
he would
But
have won if it wasn't the J.K. Simmons year. Like, he straight up would have won.
yeah, yeah, that's true. MVP?
Okay, we got anybody for legacy, or
No,
we
no,
good?
no, no, no.
Okay.
MVP. Who's the MVP for this movie, for Interstellar? Who put the team on their back, and this movie would not be the enterprise that it is without them? Who is it for you?
It's Nolan. There's no singular other
Yeah,
MVP for
it's
this. This
it's
I
mine
know
too.
I know I know we rail against auteur theory, and for good reason,
Yeah,
but there's not many directors who could have done this. Like, think of every movie you've seen this year. Do any of them reach the level of skill and artistry and then also deliver on it that this movie did? Like, I almost
George
feel bad
Miller
that
and Denis are up there, but
okay,
that's
I
the
know.
thing. George Miller and Denis, what they did with their movies, like the story of Dune doesn't hold me emotionally, and then Furiosa, we already have Mad Max Fury Road. Like George Miller and they're in even then they're very rare movies to ever happen in the first place. So
Well,
they're like an exception to the norm.
part of it is the shift in the culture, the filmmaking culture, where you don't get big blockbusters like this anymore. There are original,
Original,
taking big swings, not based off anything. And so, the movies I love this year, the one ingredient they were missing is that they're not original work.
yeah,
They were not there's not $100 million blockbuster this year that I feel like was original work. They're all made after something.
yeah.
Mad Max, even if it's original,
Bill Nye,
it's a sequel.
yeah,
Dune 2. IP and a sequel. Like, these are great ones. In the movies I like this year a lot, like Anora, for instance, that's a small budget movie. That's not a blockbuster.
That would be like
Um,
my number one movie right now is Sing Sing. It's Sing Sing, and then
yeah.
you have George Miller, right? And it's like you see the difference in budget, you see the difference in time, but it's like what makes your movie the best always? It's going to be emotion and
I
everything
mean,
else, right?
it just reminds me of how much I miss these type of movies is what I'm
100%.
trying to get at. That, like, I
100%.
can't like, I really miss these really big budget movies that are also you don't know what you're getting when you go into it. Like, you really I mean, even Dune 2, which is great,
The
you kinda know what you're
problem,
getting into when you
yeah,
go into that,
the
right?
problem
You know,
is
you
that
don't
these
what
studios,
Interstellar, you don't know.
they think that we as audiences aren't, they want a sure thing. They don't think that we're intelligent enough to know what is a good movie. And I
Yeah.
think it's disrespectful, but it is Nolan. And I got a whole thing because Nolan makes the way that Nolan makes movies, he's not glamorous. He's not doing something the brand new technology, this or that. He's the kiss method. Keep it simple, stupid. Like if it works,
Yeah.
don't break it. We can do different things with concepts, and that's gonna make cinema move forward. And he always gets everyone to bring their A game no matter who they are. He demands nothing but the best. And his standard, it is it inspires everybody, and it also moves cinema forward, and it's a reinvigoration that he always brings, and he pushes everyone to be the best they've been. He puts gas in my tank, as like, dang, like we can do this. And he gives me hope. I think that's the main
Yeah.
thing. No one gives us hope that he is so in demand right now, but it feels like the entire industry doesn't understand why he's in demand.
Mhm.
It's like they want to say IP for everyone else except Nolan, and that's not how it should be. So
Well, yeah. That no, I
I
completely
would
agree,
love,
and then
I would love for Emma Thomas to just be like,
look
"Hey, we're
ho
gonna start making our own other movies
no.
too."
Look how short the leash is on this sort of thing, though. Like,
Oh yeah,
look
yeah,
at Babylon, okay? You know, he finally got he got the leash to do what he wanted.
yeah.
He finally had the leash to make this big budget movie that's original and all that. And guess what? Didn't do well at the box office. I don't know if he's going to get that leash again. I know he's doing
No,
a
literally,
Evil
Damien,
Knievel movie, but that's IP basically. You know, that's a studio
it's
saying,
a
"Hey, can you
biopic.
make this Evil Knievel biopic
Yeah,
for us?" It's not him coming up with it. You
and it's
know,
got
and
Leo, so it's gonna get money. That's the only reason it's
and
gonna get
even
money.
think of Nolan. How many Batman movies did Nolan have to make before they finally just learned to let him do whatever he wants? You know, he had to do 3 Batman movies. He
He
had to do 3 IP blockbusters.
I think he finally got say it was Inception that was the risk, right? He
That
made
was the one that
Inception,
finally
and then
cemented it for
Inception
him.
made like
Yeah,
$800 million, and they're like, "Whoa,
yeah.
hold up." And then he finished, Dark Knight Rises, and then, this is the next one, right?
I
And
promise you
what
though,
happens?
if
He keeps
after
upping the ante besides
I
Tenet, which I
promise you
like,
though,
he
if
ups the ante.
Oppenheimer didn't do well commercially after Tenet as well,
Yeah,
we would have seen that leash been pulled back some.
yeah,
We would have seen, "Okay, Nolan, you
100%.
gotta make something IP or something smaller
Yeah.
before we do it again."
They would put him
And
back in the
that's
box.
unfortunately with the studio system, Dennis, you
Denny,
know, or
yeah. Denny
Denny,
Villeneuve, yeah.
I mean, he's in Dune right now. When he's done with Dune, he's probably gonna wanna create something original,
And if
but guess
that
what?
fails,
He's got one shot
and
at
if
it,
it
and
if it
before
doesn't
they
make
send him
enough
back to
money,
IP land.
if it
Yeah.
doesn't make enough money, they'll put him back in the box.
Yeah, they will. I mean, you saw Blade Runner didn't make a ton of money
It
either,
lost
you
money. It
know?
lost a ton of
And
money.
if Dune Part 1 didn't make all that money, guess what?
They would have never made a Dune 2.
He
They would have
No, he
never made a
probably
Dune
would have been
3.
relegated back to small pictures again,
Yep,
you know? You get relegated back to small budget when you put out a couple stinkers,
yep.
and it's not like we're never gonna see another Mad Max movie again because of
Nope.
Furiosa bombing, you know? And that's sad because
Furiosa is better than a lot of the you're gonna tell me that what movies made money this year? I'm not talking like Inside.
did any of them? Dune did, Love Lies Bleeding did, Civil War didn't.
Civil
Um,
War made money. Civil War was a good
I thought it'd make money.
it made like
It made money?
it was like a $45 million movie. They made like $150 million. It was a hit.
Looks pretty sick for 45,000,000.
Oh,
Looks pretty good.
no, bro. I know.
That's the mid-budget movies we miss, right?
Yep.
That's the type of stuff we need to
But
see.
like they
Like,
but
you know?
that's the thing. They did a good
I didn't
job
know that
with
made
it, and
money.
it made I'm surprised it made money, to be honest. But
Yeah.
okay, Deadpool Wolverine. You're gonna tell me that that's better than
Yeah. No.
yeah.
No.
But let's not end on that dour note.
Yeah.
Companion movies, hit me with them.
Yeah. So, I mean, the real answer to this is 2001: A Space Odyssey is the
Yeah,
companion movie for this, but, let's throw that out because if you're like the typical person who listens to this pod and wants a companion movie of something that maybe a little more recent, but maybe forgotten about.
Yeah.
I think Ad Astra and Gravity are two space type movies that would be an interesting comparison between this. Gravity, from the point of the way it was filmed and how it filmed space itself, they do a really good job of making space terrifying in that movie. And I think that even though that movie has a lot of empty calories in some ways, I think there's some really interesting decisions made upon how the directing and the cinematography of that. So I would suggest that because that's felt that it was big the year it came out, and then everybody forgot about it. So I want to bring that up.
And the problem
And then
was, yeah, Ad Astra, he got
Ad
nerfed.
Astra, Ad Astra, I want to say it's probably not like the greatest movie ever, but it's worth seeing because it's basically Apocalypse Now in space. And I mean, in a lot of ways, Interstellar is also Apocalypse Now in space. Like that, there's a voice calling out to you. You're going further down up the river or whatever, that whole thing.
Yep, yep.
Ad Astra's a little more on the nose about it, but it's the same thing of, I like when people try to do something a little different with space. They try to have their own take on it. It's not just sci-fi. They try to make space have a meaning behind it or
Yeah.
be a character. Space is a character in Ad Astra. It's a character in Gravity. It's a character in Interstellar. It's its own character. So those are my suggestions.
And I don't know. So first movie I thought of, the automatic comparison is always Contact, which, I don't think a lot
Yeah.
of people have seen. It's not perfect, but it's always worth watching because like they have a lot of good working Contact. So I'd always recommend that. Arrival, which was our second podcast, like our second episode. Check that out if you haven't already. First Man is actually the one I wanted to talk about
That's a
because
good comparison.
it's like
Yeah.
it's not about like necessarily, the elements of the movie, but there's an emotional story there with a very cold protagonist, and it's about the horrors of space too.
Yeah.
But I do want to
You know,
I do want to throw in one though.
wait,
Go
wait,
ahead.
wait, wait. Before you say that, this might be a good reel actually. Did I ever tell you how Interstellar ruined First Man for me?
Go ahead. Oh yeah, go ahead. We
So
saw First Man in
the
IMAX,
beginning.
and I stand by it. First Man is an IMAX movie.
No, no, but we went to see it in IMAX, and what's the first scene of the movie? It's them in the ship, and it's very Interstellar inspired. The way that I'm trying to remember, I think it's a test launch, right? Something like a test launch or something is one of the first scenes. It's very much Interstellar inspired. The way they were shot,
Yeah.
the build up, the score, and I'm like, holy, is this gonna be like Interstellar again? Like I knew nothing about the movie going into it.
Yeah.
I don't know how I did that back. Now I feel like I know everything about a movie before I go into it. But and then so it kind of ruined the movie for me because I went in and the first scene kind of confirmed my expectation. I was like, this is like Chazelle's attempt at Interstellar. This is gonna be awesome. And then it's like, no, it's a biopic about Neil Armstrong.
But it's about the
And
horror. There's a lot more there than
no,
just
and
that.
it's good.
Yeah.
But myself and a lot of people, when they first saw it, their expectations weren't right. I'm not the only
Yeah.
one, and didn't like it until they saw it again.
It's
Is all I'm trying to
is
say.
most definitely worth revisiting First Man. The one I
Okay,
wanted
so
to
what's your
throw in
last one?
was
Yeah.
Oblivion,
Oh, I love
right?
Oblivion, man. I love Oblivion. I
It's
love
it's
Oblivion.
another movie just like
Yeah,
Interstellar where it's like, oh, you've seen all these elements done good in other places, and it kind of like just puts them all together, and then here's a movie. So it's like Top Gun Maverick is affected by like the Joseph Kosinski. He made Top Gun with whatever with Tom Cruise, and the opening scene of that movie is very much like, oh, let's do our riff on Interstellar real quick for the opening.
yeah.
But Oblivion is
I
2013. It's a fun ride. Don't read anything about it. Just watch it. You'll have a
yeah.
good time with it.
You know
Like
what?
I
We
want to say
need to
turn off your
do
brain, but just be surprised. It's
we
fun.
need to do a pod where we both do a top 10 list of our favorite, like, flawed movies,
Yeah.
Movies that are, like we'll have to figure a way to put parameters around it, but that would be on my list of, like, my favorite flawed movies. Like, I know
It ain't
it's not the best movie,
but it's
but
such a good
man,
time.
it takes a swing and everybody's into it. The score is there, the shots are there. Like it's flawed, but I love that movie. I'd watch that right
And
now. I love that
directed
movie.
by he directed Tron too.
Yeah,
See? We talk about Joseph Kosinski randomly 3 times, but I mean Top Gun Maverick was like a direct
you can
influence.
see he has the juice in Oblivion though.
Oh yeah.
Before he even did Maverick, because Maverick's where he got a lot of his like real
That's
accolades.
yeah. But then
But you can
again,
see it in Oblivion where some of that's kind of in its infancy.
he's had it
That
since Tron.
yeah
He's always
yeah
I like his movies besides that one movie he made or the Spiderhead movie for Netflix. But
yeah
it is what it is. Interstellar, if you missed out in the theater, the 4K is out now. Watch it. It is still an amazing movie. Watch it. It's one of those movies where you want to see it on the biggest screen, the biggest sound, the biggest everything. you might want subtitles, but besides that, Interstellar is one of my favorite movies, and I legitimately I was like, wait, do I need to put this on my letterbox top four? Am I like I was questioning my humanity that day when I saw this movie again, and it's one of those great movies that I hope everyone has a chance to see on the big screen. So we love Interstellar, and I'm just glad Zach finally he liked the movie, but he came around all the way. You know, he sees what I
Yeah, it was still like a 9 out of 10 for me.
that's
It
what
was
I'm
a
saying. You
4
like
and
the
a
movie,
half.
but it's like there's like a very specific line where it's like I feel like when you get older, like the movie, you know, you feel that umph of the movie finally.
And to be honest, all Nolan's movies are like that, right?
Yeah,
You gotta watch it a few times, like Memento, every time I watch it, I
it gets
find
better.
something new,
It gets better.
Every time I watch Inception, I get something yeah, his movies age so well, and this is just another one, so if you haven't watched it in a while and you missed it in theaters, go watch it. There's something new for you there, I promise you.
Yeah. So we'll be back with another interesting movie next time. We're gonna have some interesting stuff coming in
We are.
2025. So I'm excited for y'all to see all the there's some dad movies, there's some romance movies. It's everything we've already done, and then we're pulling out some other stops too. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Peace and love. We will see y'all next time. We will see y'all in
See
the
ya.
Tesseract of life. Bye.